Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, there was a leather-bound notebook tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the hallway. I thought it might belong to a previous tenant, maybe a forgotten diary. But every single page had one thing, drawings of me. Some were pencil sketches, others done in ink. The first few were harmless, me tying my shoes, sitting on the couch doing dishes, but as I flipped further they changed. There was one of me sleeping with a shadow standing by the door, another where I was crying, holding something sharp in my hand. The last page showed me with hollow eyes slumped over the kitchen table. The detail was too precise, that exact tablecloth, that chipped mug. I didn't remember posing for any of these. I didn't remember crying, and I sure didn't remember bleeding, but there was a red smear on the corner of the last page, still fresh. The notebook felt heavier than it should have. The leather binding was worn smooth, like someone had touched it thousands of times. I carried it to the kitchen table, the same one from the drawing, and spread it open under the light. The smell hit me then, something metallic mixed with old paper and something else I couldn't place, something organic. I started from the beginning again, studying each sketch more carefully. The artist had captured things I barely noticed about myself. The way my left shoulder drooped slightly when I was tired, how I always touched my neck when I was nervous, the small scar on my wrist that most people never saw. Whoever drew these knew me better than I knew myself. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the progression. The drawings became more intimate as the pages turned. Me in the shower, water droplets carefully shaded on my skin. Me undressing, completely unaware. Me sleeping in positions I recognized from waking up in the exact same spot. The artist had been watching me for months, maybe longer. I called the landlord. The voice on the other end was scratchy, distant. He claimed he'd never heard of any previous tenant leaving behind personal items. The apartment had been empty for over a year before I moved in. No one else had keys. No one else had access. The next few drawings showed me in states I didn't remember being in. Sitting at my desk with my head in my hands, shoulders shaking. Standing by the window at what looked like the middle of the night, staring out at nothing. In one sketch I was holding a knife, examining the blade with an expression I'd never seen on my own face. The artist had captured something hollow in my eyes, something I didn't recognize. I started checking the locks obsessively. Windows, doors, even the bathroom, everything was secure. But the drawings suggested someone had been inside, close enough to count my eyelashes, close enough to notice the tiny mole behind my ear that even I sometimes forgot about. The sketches near the end became darker, literally darker, heavier pencil strokes, deeper shadows. In one I was sitting exactly where I sat now at this table with the notebook open in front of me, but in the drawing my face was different, older somehow, more tired, and there were other details that made my skin crawl. The coffee mug beside me in the sketch was identical to the one I was drinking from, the same crack along the handle, the same coffee stain on the saucer. But I'd bought this mug after moving in. It was new. I flipped to a page I'd somehow missed before. This one showed me sleeping, but there was someone else in the room. A figure standing in the corner, face obscured by shadow. The figure was holding something, looked like another notebook, taking notes maybe, or drawing. The smell from the notebook was getting stronger. I realized it reminded me of the scent that sometimes lingered in my bedroom, the one I'd attributed to old pipes or poor ventilation. But now, with the notebook open in front of me, I recognized it. It was the smell of pencil shavings mixed with something else, something human. I started looking for cameras, recording devices, anything that could explain how someone had documented such private moments. But the apartment was clean, too clean maybe, like someone had been careful not to leave evidence. Then I found something that stopped me cold. A sketch dated from last week showing me discovering the notebook for the first time. The expression on my face was perfectly captured, the confusion, the growing horror as I flipped through the pages. But there was something wrong with the timeline. In the drawing, I was wearing a shirt I'd thrown away months ago, a shirt that had torn beyond repair. Yet there it was, perfectly rendered on the page. I started questioning my own memory. Had I really thrown that shirt away? The garbage collection in this building was irregular, sometimes delayed for weeks. Maybe I'd forgotten, maybe I'd put it back in the drawer without thinking. But the more I studied the drawings, the more inconsistencies I found. My hair was different lengths across sketches that seemed to be from the same period. In some, I had a small cut on my finger that I'd gotten from broken glass. In others, from the same apparent time frame, my hands were unmarked. The final sketches were the most disturbing. They showed me in situations that felt like memories I couldn't quite access, cleaning something off the floor with bleach, wrapping something in plastic, standing over a sink, washing my hands over and over while staring at my reflection with dead eyes. I didn't remember any of this. But looking at the drawings, I could almost smell the bleach, could almost feel the cold water running over my knuckles. The artist had captured not just my appearance, but something deeper, something I'd apparently done but couldn't remember doing. The red smear on the last page was dry now, but when I touched it, it flaked off under my fingernail. It looked like blood, but it could have been anything. Paint, maybe, or rust from the old pipes. I closed the notebook and sat in the silence of my apartment, the same apartment someone had watched me in for months, the same apartment where I'd apparently done things I couldn't remember, things disturbing enough to sketch in careful detail. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. They stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock, for some sign of who might be there. But after a long moment, the footsteps continued down the hall. When I opened the notebook again, there was a new drawing on what had been a blank page. It showed me sitting at this table, holding the notebook, looking terrified. The timestamp in the corner indicated it had been drawn while I was sitting here in this moment. But the handwriting wasn't mine, and the perspective was from across the room, from the corner where that shadowy figure had been standing in the earlier sketch. I'm still sitting here now, afraid to turn around, afraid to look toward that corner. The smell of pencil shavings is getting stronger, and I can hear something that sounds like sketching, soft scratches of graphite on paper. The notebook is still open in front of me, and I can see my reflection in the window across the room. But in the glass, there are two silhouettes at this table. One sitting, one standing behind, looking over my shoulder. I don't remember inviting anyone in. Crime 2, the mirror came with the apartment, bolted to the wall above the bathroom sink, but something about it always felt wrong. The reflection was crisp, too crisp, like it was showing more than just the surface. One night I dropped a towel and bent to pick it up. In the mirror I didn't move. My reflection just stood there staring. I froze. Slowly I lifted my head and turned to face the glass. This time it moved, but not quite right. The left eye blinked slightly out of sync. I reached behind it, searching for a hidden camera, a mechanism, anything. But all I found was a small gap in the wall. Inside, tucked between the beams, was a recording device. The battery was still warm. When I hit play, it was my voice, whispering secrets I've never told anyone, including one I thought I'd buried forever. The voice on the recording was mine, but the words felt foreign. I heard myself talking about the night everything changed, about the choice I made that left someone else to face the consequences. My hands trembled as I rewound the device, listening again to confessions I never remembered making. The sound quality was perfect, too perfect for a random recording. Someone had been listening for weeks, maybe months. I checked every inch of that bathroom wall, running my fingers along the edges of the mirror frame. The bolts weren't standard. They were custom made with tiny holes drilled through the center. Behind the glass, I found more than just the recording device. There were photographs, dozens of them, taken through those microscopic openings. Pictures of me sleeping, showering, talking on the phone. But the most disturbing ones showed me having conversations I couldn't recall, animated discussions with someone just outside the camera's range. The apartment manager had no record of who installed the mirror. The previous tenant had moved out suddenly, leaving behind most of their belongings. When I asked to see the lease agreement, the signature was illegible, just a rushed scribble that could have been anyone's name. The forwarding address led to an empty lot across town. No forwarding mail, no emergency contacts, nothing that would trace back to a real person. I started noticing things that didn't make sense. My coffee cup would be in a different position after I showered. Books I never opened were left face down on my nightstand. The thermostat was adjusted to temperatures I never set. Someone had been in and out of my apartment regularly, moving through my life like a ghost. The lock showed no signs of tampering, which meant they had a key, or they knew exactly how to get inside without leaving evidence. The recordings multiplied. I found more devices hidden throughout the apartment, inside light fixtures, behind picture frames, even sewn into the lining of my couch cushions. Each one contained hours of audio, conversations with people I thought I'd never see again. Phone calls where I discussed things I was certain I'd kept to myself. The most chilling recording was a conversation between me and someone whose voice I recognized but couldn't place, discussing details about that night I'd tried so hard to forget. I decided to stake out my own apartment, parking across the street with a clear view of the entrance. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th, I saw a figure slip through the back alley, someone who moved with the confidence of someone who belonged there. They used a key, entering through the rear door like they lived there. I watched them through my own windows, moving through my space with intimate familiarity. They checked each recording device, replaced batteries, adjusted positions. They knew exactly where everything was hidden. When they finally left, I followed at a distance. They walked several blocks to a small office building, using another key to enter through a service door. The building directory listed mostly empty offices, but one name caught my attention. It was the same as the signature on a document I'd found in my apartment, tucked inside a book I'd never purchased. The document was a detailed psychological profile, written in clinical language that described my habits, my fears, my sleeping patterns. At the bottom, a recommendation for continued observation. I returned to my apartment and began dismantling every recording device I could find, but with each one I removed, I discovered how deep the surveillance went. They hadn't just been watching me, they'd been documenting everything. Financial records, medical appointments, conversations with friends and family. Someone had been building a comprehensive file on my entire existence. The question that haunted me wasn't just who was doing this, but why they needed such detailed information about someone like me. Breakthrough came when I found a letter addressed to the previous tenant, hidden inside the mirror's backing. It was from a private investigation firm confirming payment for extended surveillance services. The subject was listed only as Target A, but the behavioral descriptions matched me perfectly. Someone had been paying professionals to monitor my life, to document my routines, to record my most private moments. The letter was dated 6 months before I'd even moved into the apartment. That's when I realized the terrible truth. This wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated my entire living situation, ensuring I would end up in this specific apartment, surrounded by their surveillance equipment. They'd been watching me long before I knew this place existed. Every coincidence that led me here, every seemingly lucky break that made this apartment available exactly when I needed it, had been carefully planned. I confronted the apartment manager again, this time with evidence. The lease papers I'd signed weren't the originals. My signature had been traced onto documents that predated my application by months. The security deposit had been paid by someone else, someone who wanted to make sure I would move in regardless of my financial situation. I'd been selected, groomed, and positioned exactly where they wanted me. The final recording I found wasn't hidden with the others. It was sitting on my kitchen table when I came home, labeled with my name in handwriting I recognized but couldn't quite place. This time the voice wasn't just mine. It was a conversation between me and the person I'd tried so hard to forget, the person whose life had been destroyed by my silence that night. They weren't dead, as I'd assumed. They'd been planning, waiting, building a case against me using my own words as evidence. I never found out who had been funding the surveillance or how long they'd been watching. The investigation firm's office was cleared out overnight, leaving behind only empty rooms and disconnected phone lines. The recordings disappeared from my apartment, along with all the hidden devices. Even the mirror was gone, leaving only bolt holes in the bathroom wall as proof that any of it had happened. But I still hear that voice sometimes, my own voice confessing to things I thought no one would ever know. The apartment feels different now, like the walls themselves remember what they witnessed. I've changed the locks, swept for devices, even hired my own security consultant. But deep down I know they're still out there, still listening, still building their case with patience that terrifies me more than any direct confrontation ever could. The truth is I deserve whatever's coming. That night I stayed silent, that choice I made to protect myself while someone else suffered the consequences. It was always going to catch up with me. I just never imagined it would happen so methodically, so intimately. Someone out there knows exactly who I am and what I've done, and they're not finished with me yet. Crime 3, the landlord said the basement was off limits due to structural issues. I didn't question it until I noticed condensation forming on the floor above it. The air smelled faintly metallic, like blood or old tools. Eventually, I found a hidden latch beneath a shelf in the pantry. The stairs creaked downward into darkness. The basement wasn't crumbling, it was clean. Too clean. Plastic sheeting lined the walls. Metal hooks dangled from beams. In one corner was a cot with restraints, and above it a photo. It was of me, blurry, taken from behind. My knees gave out. I crawled back up and bolted the latch. That night I heard footsteps coming from under the pantry, slow, deliberate, like whoever had been down there didn't appreciate the visit. I should have left immediately, but fear has a way of freezing you in place, making you question everything you thought you knew about your own judgment. The rental application had been processed so quickly. No credit check, no references required, just cash up front and a handshake. The landlord had seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone, avoiding eye contact when he handed me the keys. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. The way the floorboards above the basement felt different under my feet, softer, as if something beneath was absorbing the weight. The faint chemical smell that intensified during humid weather. The fact that my upstairs neighbor, an elderly woman who'd lived in the building for decades, would go completely silent whenever I walked near the pantry. I knocked on her door one afternoon. She opened it just a crack, her weathered face appearing in the gap between chain lock and frame. When I mentioned the basement, her eyes widened with something between fear and recognition. "You're not the first tenant to ask about that," she whispered, glancing toward the stairwell. "The last one who rented your apartment, she asked too many questions. Then one day, she just stopped coming home." The old woman's hands shook as she spoke. She told me about sounds she'd heard over the years, muffled voices, scraping noises, the occasional thud that would make her ceiling fixtures rattle. She'd complained to the landlord multiple times, but he always had explanations: plumbing issues, renovation work, pest control. "But renovations don't happen in the middle of the night," she said, "and they don't make people disappear." I started documenting everything: the times when the basement sounds were loudest, the pattern of the landlord's visits, always unannounced, always carrying a large duffel bag, the way he would linger by the pantry, running his fingers along the shelf where I'd found the hidden latch. The building's rental history became my obsession. I spent hours at the public records office tracing ownership transfers and tenant turnover. The pattern was disturbing. Single women, usually new to the area, would rent the apartment for a few months before breaking their lease suddenly. The official reasons were always vague: job transfers, family emergencies, changed circumstances. I found newspaper clippings about missing persons cases, young women whose last known addresses matched my building. The descriptions were eerily similar: quiet, kept to themselves, no local family or close friends, the kind of people whose absence might not be immediately noticed. The landlord's background check revealed more questions than answers: multiple business licenses under different names, a construction company that had folded after safety violations, property investments that seemed to focus exclusively on buildings with basement access. I started leaving the building at irregular intervals, doubling back to watch from across the street. The landlord's visits followed a schedule I hadn't noticed before. He would arrive after dark, stay for exactly 1 hour, then leave carrying the same duffel bag, now noticeably lighter. The photograph haunted me, not just because it was of me, but because of when it must have been taken. The angle suggested someone had been watching from the building across the street, the same vantage point I now used to observe the landlord. The clothing I wore in the image was from my first week in the apartment, before I discovered the basement. I began finding other photographs, tucked between pages of books I'd never opened, slipped under my door while I slept, always the same candid style, always taken without my knowledge. They showed me going about my daily routine: grocery shopping, walking to work, sitting by my window reading. The basement called to me. Despite every instinct screaming against it, I needed to understand what I'd stumbled into. I waited until the landlord made his weekly visit, then gave him enough time to leave before returning to the pantry. The latch opened easier this time, as if it had been recently oiled. The stairs still creaked, but the sound seemed different, expectant. The basement had changed. The plastic sheeting was gone. The metal hooks had been repositioned. The cot was made with fresh linens. On a small table near the stairs, I found a folder with my name written on the cover. Inside were copies of documents I'd never shared with anyone: bank statements, medical records, employment history. There were handwritten notes in the margins, observations about my habits and routines. One entry made my blood freeze. Subject shows signs of curiosity about restricted areas, may require additional monitoring. The final page was a timeline of my tenancy, with detailed entries about my daily activities. The last entry was dated today. Subject discovered photographic evidence. Basement inspection likely. Recommend immediate transition to phase 2. I heard the front door of the building open, footsteps in the hallway above, the landlord's voice, but he wasn't alone. Two sets of footsteps approached the pantry. I turned off the basement light and pressed myself against the wall beside the stairs. "She's been asking questions," a voice I didn't recognize said. "The old woman upstairs is getting nervous. Maybe it's time to find a new location." "No," the landlord replied. "This setup took years to establish. We just need to adjust the timeline." They moved the shelf above me. Light flooded down the stairs. I held my breath, knowing that any sound would give away my position. One of them started descending. The subject profile indicated low social connectivity. The unfamiliar voice continued. Minimal family contact, few local friends, standard isolation parameters. "The basement's been compromised," the landlord said. "She's seen too much." I realized with horrible clarity that I wasn't the first tenant to discover this room. The missing women, the broken leases, the careful selection of isolated individuals, it was all part of a system, a method for making people disappear without anyone noticing they were gone. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. A flashlight beam swept across the basement, missing me by inches. I needed to get out, but the stairs were blocked. There had to be another exit. The landlord couldn't risk being trapped down here. Behind the water heater, I found a narrow door I hadn't noticed during my first visit. It opened onto a tunnel that seemed to connect to the building's main utility access. I could hear voices behind me, growing closer. I emerged in the alley behind the building, gasping and shaking. My apartment keys were still in my pocket, but going back wasn't an option. Everything I owned was upstairs, but staying meant becoming another missing person case. From a payphone 6 blocks away, I called the police. I told them about the basement, the photographs, the conversation I'd overheard. The officer who took my statement seemed skeptical but agreed to investigate. When they arrived at the building, they found my apartment empty. The landlord claimed I'd broken my lease and moved out suddenly, a family emergency, he said. The basement was clean, freshly painted, with no sign of the setup I'd described. No photographs, no restraints, no evidence of anything unusual. The building's new tenant moved in the following week, another young woman new to the area with minimal local connections. I tried to warn her, but she looked at me like I was delusional. The landlord had prepared for this possibility. He told her about a previous tenant with mental health issues who'd spread false rumors about the building. I still drive past sometimes, watching from the same spot across the street where someone once photographed me. The basement window is always dark, but occasionally I see shadows moving behind the glass. The new tenant's routine is disturbingly similar to mine. Same grocery store, same walking route, same evening schedule. I never found out what happened to the women who disappeared before me. Their names appeared briefly in missing person reports, then faded into cold case files. I wonder if they escaped like I did, or if they weren't as fortunate. The landlord still operates the building. The basement is still off limits due to structural issues. And somewhere in that darkness, the system continues. Patient, methodical, waiting for the right combination of curiosity and isolation to claim its next victim. I can't prove any of this happened. The evidence disappeared as quickly as I did. But late at night, when the city is quiet, I still hear those footsteps, slow, deliberate, like someone who knows exactly where they're going and isn't concerned about being heard. The basement smelled like cold breath. Now I know why. Crime 4, I was brushing my teeth when I heard the front door click shut. I ran to the window expecting a delivery. Instead, I saw myself walking down the steps. Same clothes, same posture, even the small scar on my neck. They didn't look back. I watched me cross the street and vanish into the next yard. I checked the mirror. My reflection was still there. I spent the whole day trying to make sense of it. Was it a hallucination, some kind of prank? But then things started going missing. My jacket, my phone, my keys. I reported the activity, but the police found no signs of forced entry. The final straw was finding a note in my own handwriting on the fridge. Thanks for keeping my spot warm. The detective assigned to my case had tired eyes and coffee stains on his shirt. He listened to my story with the patience of someone who had heard stranger things. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked if I lived alone. I told him yes, always had. He scribbled something in his notepad and asked about my work schedule, my habits, whether anyone else had access to my home. I gave him everything I could think of. My routine was simple: work, home, sleep, repeat. I kept to myself mostly. The only person with a spare key was my landlord, an elderly woman who lived 3 blocks away. She had arthritis in her hands and rarely left her house except for grocery runs. The detective's questions grew more specific. Had I noticed anyone following me, any unusual phone calls, strange smells in the house? I told him about the faint scent of cologne I sometimes caught in my living room, something expensive and unfamiliar. My own cologne was cheap drugstore stuff. This was different, heavier, like something you'd smell in a department store. He asked to see the note. I had photographed it before the original mysteriously disappeared from my fridge. The handwriting looked exactly like mine, down to the way I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. Even the pressure of the pen seemed right, the slight tremor I get when I write too fast. The detective studied the image for a long while, then asked if I had any siblings. I told him I was an only child. My parents died when I was young, and I grew up in foster care. No extended family that I knew of. The detective made another note and said he'd look into it. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to details I had never noticed before. The way my toothbrush was positioned in the holder each morning, slightly different from how I remembered leaving it. The television volume was always 1 notch higher than I preferred. My coffee mug sat in the sink with residue that looked fresher than it should have been. I installed a security camera in my living room, hidden behind a picture frame. The first few nights showed nothing unusual. Just me coming home from work, eating dinner, watching television, going to bed. But on the 4th night, something made my skin crawl. The timestamp showed activity during the hours I was at work, but the figure moving through my living room looked exactly like me. I watched the footage over and over. The person knew where everything was, moved with the same gait I had, even scratched their neck in the same spot where I had a nervous habit. They made coffee using my favorite mug, sat in my chair, and watched my television. They seemed completely at home. I called the detective immediately. He came over that afternoon and watched the footage with me. His expression grew more serious with each viewing. He asked if I had ever sleepwalked or had any episodes of memory loss. I told him no, never. He said he needed to run some background checks and would get back to me. The calls started coming that same week, people claiming they had seen me in places I had never been. A cashier at a grocery store across town said I had been buying unusual items: rope, bleach, heavy-duty garbage bags. A neighbor from several streets over mentioned seeing me sitting in a car outside their house for hours. Each report came with details that only I would know. The way I fidgeted with my car keys, the brand of cigarettes I had quit smoking years ago but apparently still bought. I began documenting everything. Every strange occurrence, every missing item, every report of my supposed presence elsewhere. The pattern that emerged made my stomach turn. Someone was living my life better than I was. They were more confident, more decisive, more present in the world than I had ever managed to be. The detective called me in for another meeting. This time his office felt different, more formal. He had a file folder thick with papers and photographs. He spread them across his desk like pieces of a puzzle. Crime scene photos, witness statements, security footage from various locations around the city. There had been a series of break-ins over the past month. Nothing violent, nothing stolen. Just someone entering homes, moving things around, leaving subtle signs of their presence. The victims all described the same feeling, that someone had been living in their space, using their belongings, sleeping in their beds. The perpetrator was careful, methodical, and seemed to know exactly how to avoid detection. The detective showed me a photo taken from a traffic camera. The figure in the image was walking away from one of the targeted houses. The timestamp matched perfectly with an alibi I had provided for my whereabouts that day. I was at work, surrounded by colleagues in meetings that were documented and recorded. Yet there I was, clear as day, walking away from a crime scene. He asked me to roll up my sleeves. I complied, confused. He compared my arms to close-up photos from the security footage. Every freckle, every small scar, every hair pattern matched exactly. It was impossible, but it was undeniable. The detective leaned forward and asked the question I had been dreading. Is there anything else you need to tell me about yourself? I searched my memory for anything that might explain what was happening. Gaps in my recollection, periods of confusion, moments where I felt disconnected from my own actions. The more I thought about it, the more uncertain I became about my own experiences. That night I set up multiple cameras throughout my house. I wanted to catch whoever was doing this to prove that I wasn't losing my mind. I went to bed with every door and window locked, every alarm set. I woke up to find all the cameras had been turned off, not disconnected or damaged, just switched off. Each one had been carefully repositioned to face the wall. On my kitchen counter was a new note written in my handwriting. Stop looking for me. You won't like what you find. The detective visited me one final time. He brought with him a thick manila envelope and a grim expression. Inside were medical records, psychiatric evaluations, and incident reports dating back years. Records I had never seen before, describing behaviors I didn't remember, treatments I had never undergone. According to the documents, I had been in and out of facilities for dissociative episodes and memory disorders. There were detailed accounts of blackouts, periods where I would disappear for days with no recollection of where I had been or what I had done. The handwriting in the reports looked like mine, but I had no memory of writing any of it. The detective explained that the investigation had led them to a disturbing conclusion. The break-ins, the sightings, the security footage, everything pointed to one perpetrator. Someone who knew my habits intimately, who could replicate my movements perfectly, who had access to my home and my belongings. He paused before delivering the final piece of information. There was no evidence of anyone else, no fingerprints that weren't mine, no DNA that couldn't be traced back to me, no witnesses who could describe anyone other than someone who looked exactly like me. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. I asked him what he was suggesting, though part of me already knew the answer. He closed the file and looked at me with something between pity and professional concern. The case would remain open, he said, but there wasn't much more they could do. He recommended I seek professional help, gave me the name of a specialist who dealt with cases like mine. I left the police station with more questions than answers. The drive home felt different, as if I were seeing my neighborhood for the first time. Every street corner, every house, every familiar landmark seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't quite grasp. At home, I found one last note waiting for me on the kitchen table. This one was different from the others, longer and more detailed. It was written in my handwriting, but the words felt foreign, like reading someone else's thoughts in my own script. You wanted to know the truth, it read. Here it is, I am the part of you that you never wanted to acknowledge. The part that acts while you sleep, that makes decisions while you hesitate, that lives while you simply exist. I am not your enemy, I am your potential. The question you need to ask yourself is not who I am, but who you are when you're not watching yourself. I read the note until the words blurred together. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room. I could feel something shifting inside me, a recognition that I wasn't ready to name. The cameras I had installed were still there, still recording. I wondered what they would show tonight, what version of myself would appear on the footage. More importantly, I wondered which version of me would be watching it back. The case remains unsolved, filed away in some cabinet at the police station. The detective moved on to other mysteries, other people with problems they couldn't explain. But I know the truth, even if I can't prove it, even if I can't fully understand it. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself doing things I don't remember deciding to do. I find myself in rooms I don't remember entering, holding objects I don't remember picking up. The line between who I am and who I might be has become so thin that I can barely see it anymore. I still live in the same house, still follow the same routines, but now I know I'm not alone here. Someone else shares this space with me, someone who looks like me and sounds like me and knows all my secrets. Someone who might be me, or might be who I could have been, or might be who I really am when no one is watching. The mirror still shows my reflection, but sometimes I wonder if I'm looking at the right person. Sometimes I wonder if the person looking back is the one who should be asking the questions. Crime 5, I kept 3 plants in the apartment, one on the windowsill, one on the coffee table, one near the door. All of them started leaning, not toward the sunlight, toward the guest room. The door was always shut, I never used it, but the plants bent that way like they were reaching. I opened the room and found nothing unusual. A dusty dresser, an unused bed. I watered the plants, turned them in different directions. They shifted back by the next morning. Then the walls of that room started warping, subtle bulges like something pressing from the inside. The closet door, which I'd left closed, was ajar. Inside was a shoebox filled with hair, all the same length, all the same color as mine. The next day, a 4th plant appeared in the room. I never bought it. The hair in the shoebox felt coarse between my fingers, brittle like it had been cut and stored for months. I counted 47 strands, each measuring exactly 4 inches. The same length my hair had been when I moved into this apartment, when I moved here to start fresh, to forget what happened in my previous life. I called the landlord. His voice cracked when I described the hair. He said the previous tenant had been a woman living alone, very quiet. She disappeared without notice, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings. The management company had cleaned out most items, but they might have missed some boxes in the closet. He offered to send someone to collect whatever remained. While waiting, I examined the guest room more carefully. The bulges in the walls were more pronounced now, forming distinct patterns. I pressed my palm against one and felt warmth beneath the surface. The wallpaper, which I'd assumed was old and peeling naturally, showed deliberate cuts, thin slices that formed letters when viewed from the right angle, letters that spelled out my name. The 4th plant sat in the corner, its leaves glossy and healthy despite having no apparent source. I'd never seen this species before, thick, waxy petals with dark veins running through them like arteries. When I touched the soil, it was damp and rich, smelling of iron and something else I couldn't identify. The maintenance worker arrived that afternoon. He was young, nervous, kept glancing at the guest room door even when we spoke in the living room. I showed him the shoebox, the plant, the strange bulges in the walls. He nodded too quickly, said he'd take care of everything. But when I mentioned the previous tenant's name, the one the landlord had given me, his face drained of color. He knew her, they dated briefly. She was obsessive, he said, had a way of learning things about people that she shouldn't know. Personal details, private habits, fears they'd never shared with anyone. She'd started showing up at his apartment uninvited, leaving gifts he'd never asked for. Plants mostly, always plants. After she disappeared, he'd helped clean out her apartment, found journals filled with detailed observations about neighbors, photographs taken through windows, hair samples organized by person and date. The management company had disposed of most items, but some boxes might have been overlooked. He'd assumed they'd gotten everything. That evening I examined my own hair in the bathroom mirror. 4 inches had grown since moving here. I trimmed it regularly, keeping it at shoulder length, but somehow it maintained the exact same measurement as the strands in the shoebox. I found scissors in the kitchen drawer and cut a small section. It matched perfectly. The plant in the guest room had grown. New shoots emerged from the base, reaching toward the closet where I'd found the hair. I moved the shoebox to the living room, but the plant continued growing in the same direction, its stems bending at unnatural angles to maintain that orientation. I searched through the apartment more thoroughly. Behind the bathroom cabinet, I found a small hole drilled through the wall, just large enough for a camera lens. The hole lined up perfectly with the shower. In the bedroom, beneath loose floorboards, I discovered a collection of my personal items, jewelry I'd thought I'd lost, a journal from my previous apartment, photographs of me sleeping that I'd never posed for. The previous tenant hadn't disappeared. She'd been watching, collecting, documenting. The apartment had been prepared for me specifically. Someone who knew my routines, my preferences, my schedule. Someone who'd arranged for me to move into this exact space. I called the maintenance worker back. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried the landlord. He claimed he'd never heard of any maintenance worker, had never sent anyone to my apartment. The man who'd visited that afternoon didn't exist in their records. The plants in the living room were dying now, their leaves turning brown and brittle. Only the mysterious 4th plant continued thriving, its growth accelerating. New branches sprouted daily, creating a canopy that cast strange shadows across the guest room walls. The shadows moved independently of the plant's actual position, forming shapes that looked almost human. I found more hair samples hidden throughout the apartment. In the kitchen pantry, behind books on the shelf, inside the washing machine filter. All cut to the same length, all the same color as mine. Some were recent, still carrying the scent of my shampoo. Others were older, brittle, suggesting this collection had been ongoing for months before I'd even moved in. The journals I'd discovered contained entries written in my handwriting, describing events I'd never experienced. Conversations I'd never had, thoughts I'd never thought. Page after page of my life as observed and interpreted by someone else, written in my own hand but expressing sentiments that weren't mine. I stopped cutting my hair, stopped trimming anything. I wanted to see what would happen if I disrupted the pattern. The plant in the guest room began wilting immediately, its leaves curling inward like closing fists. The bulges in the walls flattened. The shadows returned to normal positions. But other things started happening. I'd wake to find my hair arranged differently on the pillow, braided in patterns I didn't recognize. Personal items would be moved slightly, not enough to be obvious, just enough to feel wrong. The apartment's temperature would shift without explanation, always cooler in the guest room, always warmer near the front door. The maintenance worker called me back finally. His voice was different now, steadier, more confident. He apologized for the confusion, said he'd been dealing with personal issues. He wanted to schedule another visit to finish the job he'd started. Something about his tone made my skin crawl. I declined. I started documenting everything, photographing the plant's growth, measuring the hair samples, recording the temperature variations, creating my own journal of observations, written in my genuine handwriting to distinguish it from the fabricated entries I'd found. The pattern that emerged was meticulous, planned, executed with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of my habits and preferences. Someone had been preparing this apartment for me long before I'd moved in. They'd studied my routines, collected samples of my DNA, practiced mimicking my handwriting. The previous tenant hadn't disappeared. She had been transformed into me, replaced by me, become me in some way that I was only beginning to understand. The fourth plant produced flowers now, small, dark blooms that opened only after sunset, releasing a scent that reminded me of the perfume I'd worn in my previous apartment. The perfume I'd stopped using when I moved here, wanting to leave all traces of my old life behind. But my old life had followed me, or perhaps I'd never left it at all. Perhaps the woman who'd lived here before was still living here, still watching, still collecting. Perhaps I was the one who'd disappeared and she was the one who'd remained. The hair continues growing, the plant continues reaching, and I continue cutting, measuring, documenting, trying to understand which one of us is real and which one is the reflection. The answer might be in the guest room, behind the warped walls, beneath the floorboards where more secrets wait to be discovered. But some truths are too dangerous to uncover. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some doors should remain closed, even when the plants keep growing toward them, even when everything in the apartment lines in that direction, reaching for something that might be better left alone. Crime 6, my apartment has beige carpet, soft, but it shows every mark. I vacuum regularly, especially after guests, but I hadn't had any. Still, I noticed new footprints, not for me, too small, too narrow. They led from the front door to the bathroom, then to the bedroom. Sometimes they stopped mid-hallway, sometimes they went in circles. I set up a powder trap just to see. The next morning there were prints again, smudged, like someone had noticed the trick and tried to wipe them. I checked the locks, nothing. I installed a camera. That night I stayed up watching. At one point the feed glitched. When it resumed I was asleep on the couch. But the footprints, they were being made in real time, one by one, and no one was visible. I rewound the footage repeatedly, frame by frame. The glitch lasted exactly 17 seconds. Before it, empty hallway. After it, me unconscious on the couch and fresh impressions appearing on the carpet. The camera angle showed everything, no blind spots, no way someone could have entered without being seen. Yet the prints were there, still damp from whatever substance had been on those feet. I called the building management. The superintendent, a heavy-set man with calloused hands, listened with the patience of someone who had heard stranger complaints. He checked the master key log, no entries recorded for my unit. He examined my locks with a magnifying glass, running his fingers along the metal. No scratches, no signs of tampering. He suggested I might be sleepwalking, leaving my own prints without remembering. But I know my feet. I know their shape, their size, the way my weight distributes across the arch. The next night I sprinkled flour across the entire floor before bed. I slept in my chair, facing the hallway with a flashlight in my lap. I woke to complete darkness and the sound of someone moving through my apartment. not walking, sliding, fabric against fabric, a rustling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I clicked the flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a trail of flowers scattered in patterns I had never seen before. Swirls and spirals as if someone had danced through the powder, but the footprints underneath were the same, small, narrow, deliberate. I followed the trail to my bedroom. The flower stopped at the foot of my bed, but the impressions continued across the comforter. Someone had been lying there, curled on their side. The indentation was still warm when I pressed my hand against it. I pulled back the covers and found a single hair, long, dark, nothing like mine. I sealed it in a plastic bag and placed it in my freezer, the way I had seen investigators do in documentaries. The building has 12 units, and I began visiting each one. I told them about maintenance issues, about checking smoke detectors, anything to get a look at the people who lived here. Most were ordinary families with children, elderly couples, a few young professionals like myself. But the woman in Unit 7 made my skin crawl. She answered her door barefoot, and I found myself staring at her feet, small, narrow, with a distinctive arch. She caught me looking and smiled, but it never reached her eyes. I started documenting everything. The patterns of the footprints, the timing of their appearances, the way they seemed to follow specific routes through my apartment. I mapped them on graph paper, using different colors for different nights. What emerged was a pattern of familiarity, someone who knew exactly where to step to avoid the creaking floorboard near the kitchen, who knew which drawer I kept flashlights in, who understood the layout of my space better than a stranger should. The hair from my freezer came back from the lab with inconclusive results. No match in any database, but it had been treated with an expensive conditioner, the kind found in high-end salons. I started paying attention to the women in my building, noting who had professional manicures, who wore designer shoes, who carried themselves with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what they wanted. One evening I pretended to leave for work, but doubled back through the building's rear entrance. I positioned myself in the emergency stairwell with a clear view of my door. The hallway remained empty for hours. Then, as the building settled into its nighttime quiet, I heard the soft click of a lock turning. Not my lock, the sound came from Unit 7. The woman emerged, moving with the careful silence of someone who had practiced this routine. She carried a small bag and wore soft-soled shoes that would leave no sound on a carpet. She walked directly to my door and produced a key. Not a master key, not a lock pick, a key that fit perfectly, turned smoothly, and opened my door without resistance. She entered my apartment as if it were her own, closing the door behind her with practiced care. I waited, counting heartbeats, trying to understand what I was witnessing. When she emerged 45 minutes later, she was carrying something different, a small object I couldn't identify from my hiding place. The next morning I searched my apartment methodically. Nothing seemed missing, but something felt different. My desk drawers had been reorganized, papers shifted slightly. My bathroom cabinet had been rearranged, toothbrush moved, prescription bottles turned to face different directions. Small changes, nearly imperceptible but deliberate. Someone had been studying my habits, learning my routines, cataloging my life. I confronted the building manager again, this time with evidence. Photos of the footprints, documentation of the pattern, timestamps from my security camera. He listened with growing discomfort, shifting in his chair, avoiding eye contact. When I mentioned the woman in Unit 7, he became defensive. She had been a tenant for years, he said. Model resident, always paid rent early, never caused problems. But when I asked about her key, about who had access to mine, he became evasive. Building policy, he said, privacy concerns, legal restrictions. That night I changed all my locks, professional-grade deadbolts, security chains, door reinforcement bars. I installed motion sensors and upgraded my camera system. I felt secure for the first time in weeks, protected behind multiple layers of defense. But when I woke the next morning, the footprints were there again. Fresh, clear, leading from my front door to the new hiding place where I had moved my valuables. Someone had been in my apartment, despite every precaution I had taken. I began sleeping elsewhere, hotels, friends' couches, even my car. But every morning I returned to find new evidence of intrusion. The woman in Unit 7 had not been seen in days. Her apartment remained dark, her parking space empty. The building manager claimed she had gone to visit family, but he could not provide details. When I asked to see her lease, he said the files were confidential. When I asked about her references, he said the information was protected. The truth came in fragments, pieced together from overheard conversations and careful observation. The woman in Unit 7 had never been a tenant. She was connected to the building's ownership, part of some arrangement that existed outside normal procedures. Her access to my apartment was not unauthorized. It was sanctioned, approved, part of something larger that I had stumbled into without understanding. I moved out within the week, but the footprints followed me. Different patterns, different locations, but the same small, narrow impressions appearing where they should not exist. I have changed addresses 5 times since then, always finding new evidence of surveillance, new signs of intrusion. Sometimes I wonder if I am losing my mind, if the stress has created paranoia where none should exist. But then I find another hair, another disturbance, another footprint that proves I am not alone. The investigation continues, but the answers remain elusive. Who was the woman in Unit 7? What was her connection to the building? Why was my apartment chosen for whatever purpose she served? The questions multiply with each new discovery, each fresh piece of evidence that leads nowhere. I document everything, but documentation is not resolution. The footprints appear, the pattern continues, and I remain trapped in a mystery that has no ending. Sometimes I catch glimpses of her, a figure in peripheral vision, a face in a crowd that disappears when I turn to look directly. She exists in the spaces between certainty and doubt, in the gap between what I know and what I can prove. The footprints on my carpet were just the beginning of something much larger, something that continues to unfold in ways I cannot predict or control. The beige carpet is gone now, replaced with hardwood floors that show no marks. But the feeling remains, the knowledge that privacy is an illusion, that security is temporary, that someone is always watching, always waiting, always one step ahead. The footprints were never about the carpet. They were about power, about control, about the realization that the space you call home belongs to someone else entirely. And somewhere in an apartment I will never find, small feet continue their patient dance across floors that I cannot see, leaving impressions that will never be erased. Crime 7, I never liked the attic. The air was too still, the kind of quiet that pressed against your skull. One day I went up to grab an old suitcase. The light bulb flickered, but I ignored it. When I turned to leave, the door was shut. The latch had slid from the outside. I pounded and yelled until I was hoarse. No one came. Then I heard dragging, slow, heavy, like something being pulled across the floor. The sound wasn't in the attic. It was below, in the hallway. I froze. My phone had no signal. I waited, breathing shallow. Eventually, the door creaked open. No one was there, but in the corner of the attic, scratched into the wood, was a message: "Stay out of my room." That message haunted me for weeks. The handwriting was crude, desperate, carved deep enough to splinter the wood. I told myself it could have been anyone, the previous tenant, maybe a child playing games. But the house had been empty for 2 years before I moved in. The real estate agent had been eager to close, almost too eager. The price was suspiciously low for the neighborhood. I started paying attention to things I had dismissed before. The way the floorboards creaked in a specific pattern during certain hours. How the basement door was always slightly ajar despite my constant attempts to keep it closed. The smell of cigarette smoke that drifted through the vents, even though I had never smoked, and the house had been professionally cleaned. My neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived next door for decades, watched me from her window. When I finally approached her, she invited me in for coffee. Her hands shook as she poured, and she kept glancing toward my house. She told me about the family who had lived there before the vacancy, a mother, father, and teenage daughter. The daughter had been troubled, she said, using that careful tone people use when they mean something darker. The girl had spent most of her time in the attic, the neighbor explained. She had converted it into her bedroom against her parents' wishes. They had fought about it constantly. Voices carrying through the thin walls, doors slamming, the sound of furniture being moved around upstairs. Then one morning the screaming stopped. The family moved out within a week, leaving behind furniture and belongings as if they had fled. I asked what happened to the daughter. The neighbor's cup rattled against the saucer. She didn't know, she said. The family had refused to discuss it with anyone. But she remembered the ambulance that came one evening, no sirens, just quiet efficiency. No one was carried out on a stretcher. The neighbor had watched from her window as the paramedics spent a long time upstairs before leaving empty-handed. That night I climbed back into the attic. The suitcase I had originally come for was still there, covered in dust. But now I noticed other things, scratches on the walls that formed patterns almost like tally marks. A mattress pushed against the far corner, stained and moldy. Empty food containers scattered around, some still sealed but expired years ago. It looked like someone had been living up there, hiding. I found a shoebox filled with photographs. The images were dark, taken with poor lighting, but I could make out the same room from different angles. The attic, but furnished differently. A bed in the center, posters on the walls, personal belongings arranged carefully. A teenage girl's sanctuary. In some photos, I could see her reflection in a small mirror propped against the window. She looked thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. The last photo in the box showed the attic empty, except for scratch marks on the walls and what looked like dark stains on the floorboards. Someone had written on the back in the same handwriting I had seen carved into the wood, "They made me leave, but I'm still here." I took the box downstairs and spread the photos across my kitchen table. Under better lighting, I could see details I had missed. In several images, there were other figures partially visible in the shadows, adults standing in the doorway, watching. Their faces were always obscured, but their posture suggested anger, impatience. In one photo, a hand was reaching toward the camera as if trying to grab it. The next morning, I called the real estate agency. The agent who had sold me the house was no longer with the company. Her replacement was helpful, but had limited information about the previous owners. The sale had been handled quickly, she said. The family had been motivated sellers, accepting the first offer without negotiation. They had left a forwarding address, but when I pressed for details, she became evasive. Privacy laws, she explained. I decided to visit the public library and search through old newspaper archives. It took hours of scrolling through microfiche, but I eventually found what I was looking for. A small article buried on the back page, barely 3 paragraphs long. A local teenager had been reported missing by school officials after failing to attend classes for several weeks. The family had claimed she was being homeschooled, but neighbors reported not seeing her for months. When authorities investigated, they found evidence of prolonged confinement in the family's attic. The girl was discovered malnourished and in poor health. The family had claimed she had confined herself willingly due to mental health issues. The article mentioned that charges were being considered, but I couldn't find any follow-up stories. It was as if the case had simply disappeared from public record. I tried searching for the family's name in court documents, but came up empty. Either the records had been sealed or the case had been handled quietly, away from media attention. That evening I heard the dragging sound again. It started in the attic and moved slowly through the house, following the same path each time. Down the attic stairs, through the hallway, stopping at my bedroom door. I lay still, listening to my own heartbeat until the sound retreated back upstairs. In the morning, I found muddy footprints on the hallway carpet, even though it hadn't rained in days. I contacted a private investigator, someone recommended by a friend who worked in social services. She was expensive but thorough, specializing in cases involving family abuse and missing persons. When I showed her the photographs and newspaper clipping, her expression grew serious. She recognized the signs, she said. Families who isolated troubled children, keeping them hidden from authorities and neighbors. Sometimes the confinement was presented as protection, other times as punishment. The investigator made some calls and discovered that the family had moved across the country shortly after leaving my house. The father had changed jobs, the mother had stopped using social media, and there was no trace of the daughter in any public records. No school enrollment, no medical records, no employment history. She had effectively vanished from all official documentation after the incident. But the investigator found something else. Hospital records showing that a teenage girl matching the daughter's description had been admitted to a psychiatric facility shortly before the family moved. The admission was voluntary, according to the paperwork, but the circumstances were unusual. The girl had been brought in by her parents, claiming she was delusional, insisting that she was being held against her will in their home. The hospital staff had noted signs of prolonged isolation and possible malnutrition, but the parents had provided explanations for everything. The girl had been released after a short stay, deemed stable and ready to return home. But according to the investigator's sources, she had never actually gone home. Instead, she had been transferred to a different facility in another state, one that specialized in long-term care for patients with severe mental health issues. The trail went cold there. I spent the next few days processing this information. The girl in the attic hadn't been a rebellious teenager choosing isolation. She had been trapped, possibly for months or years, while her parents maintained the appearance of a normal family to the outside world. The scratches on the walls weren't decorative. They were the desperate markings of someone counting days, marking time, leaving evidence of her existence. The photographs took on a different meaning. They weren't personal mementos. They were documentation, proof that she had been there, that someone had cared enough to record her presence. Maybe she had taken them herself, or maybe someone else had photographed her confinement for reasons I didn't want to consider. I realized that the sounds I had been hearing weren't supernatural. They were memories embedded in the house itself, echoes of trauma that had occurred within these walls. The dragging sound was probably the girl being moved from room to room, or furniture being rearranged to accommodate her imprisonment. The attic door locking itself was likely a mechanism her parents had installed to keep her contained. The message carved into the wood, "Stay out of my room," wasn't a threat to me. It was a plea from someone who had fought to maintain some small sense of ownership over her space, even while being held captive. The attic had been her entire world for an unknown period of time, and she had desperately tried to protect that small territory from further intrusion. But questions remained. Where was she now? Was she still alive? Had the psychiatric facility been another form of imprisonment, or had it genuinely helped her recover? The investigator had reached dead ends, and pursuing the case further would require resources and legal authority that I didn't possess. I found myself returning to the attic regularly, sitting among the remnants of her confinement. The space felt different now that I understood its history, less threatening, more tragic. I cleaned up the garbage and stains, not to erase the evidence, but to restore some dignity to what had been her home. Sometimes I imagined I could hear breathing in the walls, soft and careful, the way someone might breathe when trying not to be discovered. Other times I felt watched, not malevolently but hopefully, as if someone was grateful that their story was finally being acknowledged. The truth is, I may never know what really happened to the girl who lived in my attic. The legal system had failed her, her family had silenced her, and society had forgotten her. She existed now only in scratched wood, faded photographs, and the memories of a house that had witnessed her suffering. I decided to stay in the house, not despite its history, but because of it. Someone needed to remember her, to ensure that her story wasn't completely erased. The attic door doesn't lock itself anymore, and the dragging sounds have stopped. But sometimes, when the house is very quiet, I hear something that might be footsteps, light and careful, moving through the rooms below. I like to think she's finally free to walk through the entire house, no longer confined to a single room. Whether she's a memory, a presence, or simply the echo of injustice that demands acknowledgement, I'm no longer afraid. Some secrets are too important to bury, and some voices refuse to be silenced forever. The case remains officially closed, the family has disappeared into anonymity, and the girl's fate remains unknown. But in this house, in this attic, her story continues. And as long as I'm here, someone will remember that she existed, that she mattered, and that what happened to her was not acceptable. The real crime wasn't just her imprisonment, it was how easily she was forgotten. Crime ate even when the power was out, that closet glowed, a faint yellowish light like the inside of an old refrigerator. I never installed a bulb in there. I tried unplugging the breaker just to be sure. Still the glow persisted. One night curiosity won. I opened the closet wide and stepped inside. The air was thick, damp. The walls weren't drywall, they were padded, soundproof. There were fingernail scratches along the back panel. In the corner, something metallic glinted, a belt buckle. I reached for it and pulled. It was attached to a harness. A voice whispered behind me, "Shut the door." I turned, nothing, but the door clicked shut by itself and the light went out. I've never opened it again, but sometimes it opens by itself. The house came with paperwork, 3 boxes of it actually. The previous owner had died and the estate sale included everything. Medical records, bank statements, receipts dating back decades. I thought I'd throw most of it away, but something made me keep looking through the files. The man who lived here before me was meticulous. Every transaction documented, every appointment logged, every interaction cataloged with an obsessive precision that made my skin crawl. His name was crossed out in black marker on every document I found. Someone had taken great care to redact his identity, but they'd missed things. Prescription bottles with partial labels, a gym membership card tucked inside a medical folder, a business card for a therapist specializing in trauma recovery. The details painted a picture of someone who'd been trying very hard to disappear from his own life. I started visiting the neighbors, asking casual questions about the previous resident. The woman next door would only say he kept to himself. The man across the street mentioned strange noises, but only during power outages. A jogger who passed by regularly told me she'd seen lights in the house even when the electricity was supposedly cut off. Everyone seemed relieved he was gone, but no one would say why. The therapist's business card led me to a small office above a pharmacy. The receptionist was hesitant to speak about former patients, but I explained I'd inherited some of his belongings and wanted to return them. She softened, said he'd been coming for treatment related to what she called complicated grief. She mentioned he'd been involved in some kind of incident with a missing person case, though she couldn't provide details. I went to the local library and searched through old newspaper archives. Missing person reports, unsolved cases, cold investigations that had gone nowhere. One name kept appearing in the articles, a young woman who'd vanished from her apartment building. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no leads. The case had consumed the local police department for months before being quietly shelved. The apartment building was only a few blocks from my house. I walked past it several times, studying the windows, the fire escapes, the alleyways. Something about the architecture felt familiar, though I'd never been there before. The brick pattern, the way the shadows fell across the entrance, the narrow gap between buildings where someone could wait unseen. Back home, I found myself staring at that closet door. The scratches on the inside weren't random. They formed patterns, letters maybe, words that had been carved with desperate fingernails. I brought a flashlight and tried to read them, but the padding made it difficult to see clearly. The harness I'd found was leather, well worn, with adjustable straps that suggested it had been used multiple times. I contacted the detective who'd worked the missing person case. He was retired now, living in a small apartment on the other side of town. When I mentioned the house address, his face changed. He told me they'd questioned the previous owner extensively. He'd been cooperative, even invited them to search the property. They'd found nothing suspicious, but something about the man had bothered him. Too eager to help, too quick with explanations, too comfortable discussing the details of the disappearance. The detective pulled out an old file folder. Inside were photographs of the missing woman, witness statements, a timeline of her last known activities. She'd been working late, studying for exams, preparing for a job interview. Her routine was predictable, her path home always the same. Someone had been watching her, learning her patterns, waiting for the right moment. He showed me a map with pins marking locations of interest. The woman's apartment, the library where she studied, the coffee shop where she stopped each morning, and there, marked with a red pin, was my house. The previous owner had been questioned because someone matching his description had been seen in the area multiple times during the weeks before the disappearance. I asked about the closet, about any evidence they might have found in the house. The detective shook his head. They'd searched thoroughly, he said, but the owner had recently renovated. New flooring, fresh paint, updated electrical work. If there had been anything to find, it was gone by the time they got there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the woman, about her final moments, about the fear she must have felt. The closet door was slightly ajar when I walked past it, though I was certain I'd closed it. Inside, the yellowish glow seemed brighter, more urgent. The scratches in the padding looked deeper, more deliberate. I called the detective again and asked if they'd ever tested the house for forensic evidence. Blood, DNA, any traces that might have survived the renovation. He said they'd tried, but the previous owner had been thorough. Bleach residue on the subfloor, new drywall throughout, even the plumbing had been replaced. It was like he'd erased every trace of what had happened there. The missing woman's photograph stared back at me from the case file. Young, hopeful, planning for a future that never came. Her family still held vigils, still posted flyers, still believed she might come home someday. They deserved answers, but the trail had gone cold. The previous owner had died of natural causes, taking his secrets with him. I spent weeks going through his belongings more carefully. Hidden between the pages of books, I found receipts for soundproofing materials, heavy-duty cleaning supplies, tools that had no obvious purpose in a residential setting. There were photographs, too, taken from a distance, showing people who seemed unaware they were being watched. None of them were the missing woman, but the pattern was clear. The closet's glow has become a constant presence in my life. I've learned to live with it, to accept that some questions can't be answered, some truths are too dark to fully comprehend. Sometimes I hear sounds from inside, muffled voices that might be my imagination or might be something else entirely. I tell myself it's the house settling, pipes expanding, wood shifting with the seasons. But deep down, I know what that closet was used for. I know why the previous owner was so eager to help the police, why he renovated so quickly, why he documented every aspect of his life except the things that mattered most. He was hiding in plain sight, protected by his own cooperation, shielded by his apparent transparency. The missing woman's case remains unsolved. Her family continues to search, to hope, to believe in a reunion that will never come. And I continue to live in this house, sharing space with the ghost of someone else's crime, keeper of secrets I can never prove but can never forget. The closet door stays closed now, but the light still glows, a constant reminder of the darkness that humans are capable of hiding behind the most ordinary facades. Crime 9, I was changing a bulb when I saw it, a square outline in the ceiling, barely visible in the paint. A hatch, no latch, no handle, just a cutout. I stood on a chair and pushed. It opened. Inside was darkness, but the air was warm. I reached up and touched something soft. Fabric, a coat. I pulled it out. It was mine. One I lost months ago. Then came a notebook, not mine. Every page detailed my routines, when I cook, where I sit, how often I sleep on my side. The last page said, "He sleeps too deeply." I sealed the hatch and painted over it. That night I heard scratching from above, and a whisper, "You weren't supposed to find that." The coat still smelled like me, not the stale scent of something forgotten, but fresh, as if it had been worn recently. The fabric felt soft between my fingers, almost warm to the touch. I held it up to the light and noticed small tears near the shoulders, tears that weren't there when I last wore it. The notebook was worse. The handwriting was neat, precise, each entry dated with careful attention to detail. My breakfast routine, the way I brush my teeth, how I check the locks before bed. Things only someone watching very closely would know. I called the landlord the next morning. His voice was casual, almost bored. He claimed ignorance about any hatch. The previous tenant had been quiet, he said, a professional type, left suddenly without notice, no forwarding address. The keys were returned through the mail slot with a note apologizing for the rush. Nothing suspicious, just life happening, he assured me. But when I pressed for more details, his tone changed. Short answers, nervous laughter. He hung up after promising to look into it. The building manager was more helpful. She remembered the previous tenant well. A woman who kept odd hours, quiet footsteps in the hallway at all times of day and night. The other residents had complained about sounds coming from the walls, scratching, tapping. Management assumed it was mice. The woman had lived here for over 2 years, she told me. Always paid rent early, never caused trouble. But there had been one incident. A neighbor reported seeing someone on the roof. Management investigated but found nothing. The tenant moved out the following week. I examined the hatch again. The edges were smooth, professionally cut. This wasn't some maintenance access or ventilation system. Someone had created this opening deliberately. The space above was larger than I expected. I climbed up with a flashlight. The area stretched across several apartments. Insulation had been moved aside to create pathways. Small holes drilled through walls provided views into other units. I could see into the apartment next door, the bedroom, the kitchen, everything. My neighbor was a college student. She worked late shifts and studied through the night. I knocked on her door. When she answered, her face went pale. She recognized me immediately, though we had never spoken. She invited me in, her hands shaking as she made coffee. The conversation was stilted at first. She admitted to feeling watched. Items moved when she wasn't looking. Food disappeared from her refrigerator. She had reported these incidents to management, but was told it was probably stress from school. They suggested she get more sleep. She showed me her bedroom, a small hole in the ceiling, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. We checked the other rooms, more holes, each one providing a perfect view of her living spaces. She had been documenting the incidents in a journal, missing underwear, displaced furniture, the sensation of being observed while sleeping. Her entries dated back months, overlapping with the time the previous tenant lived above us. The final entry was from the night she moved out. It simply read, "I know someone is watching." The police were skeptical. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of theft. The holes could have been there for years, they suggested, maybe previous repairs or utility work. The notebook might be some kind of art project or creative writing exercise. Without proof of actual criminal activity, their hands were tied. They took photos and filed a report. The investigating officer was polite but dismissive. He suggested I install better locks and consider a security system. Standard advice for paranoid residents. I couldn't sleep after that. Every sound from above sent my heart racing. I researched the building's history. The structure was old, converted from commercial use decades ago. The ceiling spaces had never been properly sealed. Previous complaints about noises, missing items, and feelings of being watched stretched back years. Different apartments, different tenants, always the same pattern. Management consistently blamed stress, imagination, or coincidence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former resident reached out after seeing my post on a neighborhood forum. She had lived here 3 years ago, same experiences, same dismissive responses from management, but she had done something I hadn't thought of. She had installed a hidden camera in her apartment. The footage was disturbing, a figure moving through her space while she slept, going through her belongings, watching her from corners she couldn't see. The person was careful, methodical, always staying out of direct sight. She had taken the footage to police. They investigated and found evidence of someone living in the ceiling spaces, makeshift living areas, food stored in hidden compartments, personal items belonging to various tenants, but when they searched, the spaces were empty. Whoever had been there was gone. The case went cold. The woman moved out shortly after. She gave me copies of everything. Photos, videos, police reports, a pattern spanning years. I realized the previous tenant might not have been the perpetrator. She might have been another victim, someone who discovered the truth and fled. The real question was whether the watcher was still here, still moving through the darkness above our heads, still collecting pieces of our lives while we slept below unaware. The scratching sounds continued, sometimes footsteps, always at night when the building was quiet. I started staying awake, listening, documenting everything like the others before me. The sounds followed a pattern, movement between apartments, long periods of silence, then activity again. Whoever was up there knew our schedules, knew when we were home, when we were sleeping, when we were vulnerable. They had been doing this for years, perfecting their methods, learning from each new set of residents. The notebook I found contained more than just observations about me. There were entries about other tenants, past and present, details that could only come from extended surveillance, private moments, personal habits, intimate behaviors no stranger should know. The handwriting varied slightly throughout, as if different people had contributed over time, or perhaps one person whose writing had evolved across years of careful documentation. I haven't called the police again. The evidence I have is circumstantial. Sounds in the walls, a notebook that could belong to anyone, a coat that might have been misplaced. But late at night, when the building settles and the scratching starts again, I know someone is up there, watching, waiting, learning everything there is to know about the people who live below. And I wonder if they know that I know, if they're planning their next move, or if they're simply waiting for me to leave like all the others before me. The hatch is painted over now, sealed as if it never existed, but paint doesn't stop sound. And it doesn't erase the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness above, someone is still watching, still collecting our secrets, still living in the spaces between our lives, invisible and patient. The whisper I heard that first night echoes in my memory. You weren't supposed to find that, but I did find it, and now I can't unknow what I know, can't unsee what I've seen, can't unhear what I've heard. Sometimes I catch myself looking up at the ceiling, searching for signs. Other times I find myself documenting my own routines, wondering what someone watching would write about me. The line between observer and observed has blurred. I am both hunter and prey in a game I never chose to play. And somewhere in the darkness above, someone is taking notes. Someone is always taking notes. Story 10. She wiped the mist off the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. Yet an unsettling feeling crept in. Her appearance seemed normal, her attire unchanged. But the longer she stared, the deeper the unease settled in. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement not of her own making. And as she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing. This was the beginning of the enigma surrounding Rebecca Thorne. What transpired next would baffle investigators and cast a shadow over the community for years to come. Rebecca resided alone in a humble apartment nestled in a serene suburban enclave. Known for her meticulous nature and reserved demeanor, she kept to herself while maintaining amicable ties with her neighbors. A data analyst for a mid-sized firm, her days were governed by routine and precision. Nothing about her hinted at the role she would play in one of the most mystifying criminal puzzles of the era. The initial peculiarities seemed harmless. Objects in Rebecca's home began to shift, no items missing, just rearranged. A cup moved to a different shelf, books shuffled around, her toothbrush displaced. She brushed off these anomalies as mere lapses, attributing them to the strain of long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights. Detective Marion Shaw received the first complaint when Rebecca, after enduring weeks of disturbances, finally sought help from the authorities. Initially deemed non-criminal, Shaw noted the absence of concrete evidence, a case more suited for mental health services than police intervention. The incident was recorded and filed away among low-priority matters. There was nothing tangible, Shaw later recounted. No signs of forced entry, no missing items. Just a woman who felt a sense of unease in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the bathroom mirror episode. During her second interaction with law enforcement, Rebecca recounted in vivid detail how her reflection appeared to move independently, how she felt under constant surveillance even when alone. This time she presented proof, surveillance footage from a camera she had installed, aimed at her front door. The chilling video captured Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, followed by an identical figure entering the apartment 20 minutes later, using a key. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or manipulation, finding none. The intruder mirrored Rebecca's movements, attire, and even carried her distinctive leather bag. However, Rebecca had already clocked in at her office across town, according to her workplace security records. "We are facing a doppelganger phenomenon," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can imitate her with uncanny precision." The probe intensified. Fingerprints found in the apartment matched only Rebecca's, with no foreign DNA detected. Neighbors reported nothing out of the ordinary, just Rebecca's routine comings and goings. One neighbor, Mrs. Keller, recalled greeting Rebecca upon her return one evening, receiving no response, an action she found unusual but not alarming. Rebecca began documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations in her living space escalated. Food she didn't recall consuming vanished from her fridge, her computer displayed searches she hadn't initiated, and unsettlingly, selfies on her phone bore her likeness, yet she had no memory of taking them. Some images captured a subtly askew expression, a grin too wide, eyes too intense. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or perhaps someone is trying to make me believe so." A breakthrough emerged when a pattern emerged in the surveillance footage. The doppelganger only entered when Rebecca left for specific engagements, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, pre-planned activities with predictable durations. Someone has an intimate knowledge of your routine, Shaw elucidated. This is not random, it is calculated surveillance and infiltration. A forensic psychologist posited that they were dealing with a fixation case, an individual fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, possibly aiming to supplant her entirely. Such occurrences, though rare, were documented in psychological literature. The culprit often experienced a mental breakdown, fixating on a target embodying qualities they desired: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. Suspicions narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former co-worker, Lily Winters, dismissed for increasingly erratic behavior. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-dismissal, she had sent Rebecca unsettling emails, one stating, "We could be one and the same. At times, I feel more like you than you do." With a warrant in hand, Detective Shaw led a search of Lily's residence. What they uncovered transformed the case from eerie to chilling. One room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls were adorned with snapshots, countless images of Rebecca entering her apartment, shopping, socializing, all snapped without her knowledge. A wardrobe in the closet housed exact duplicates of Rebecca's attire. Makeup brands matching Rebecca's favorites sat on a vanity alongside meticulous notes on her habits, speech patterns, and mannerisms. Most incriminating were the practice videos. Lily had recorded herself mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, and expressions. The progression was evident: initial attempts awkward and conspicuous, later iterations nearly indistinguishable from the authentic Rebecca. "She aspired to be me," whispered Rebecca upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't merely imitating me, she was erasing me." Forensic analysts found sophisticated equipment for replicating keys and cloning electronic access cards. Lily had orchestrated an intricate system to track Rebecca's movements, including a calendar predicting her schedule in detail. What eluded investigators was Lily's endgame. Journals discovered in her home contained rambling entries shifting between first and third person, at times referring to Rebecca interchangeably as me and her within the same passage. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. "Soon, only one of us will remain. The stronger one will prevail." As authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her residence showed signs of abrupt departure, drawers left ajar, some technology missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was placed under protective custody, relocated to a secure undisclosed site under constant surveillance. For 3 weeks, all locations tied to her former life were closely monitored. Lily failed to surface. The case took a disconcerting turn when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave, Rebecca was spotted entering the building. Footage confirmed the sighting: a figure identical to Rebecca had accessed the premises using a valid ID, proceeded to her former workstation, and pored over files for 40 minutes before exiting. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca remained sheltered in a guarded safe house, incapable of being at the office. The truth dawned on them. Lily hadn't fled, she had made her move. She was now assuming Rebecca's identity, stepping into her existence while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains unresolved. Lily Winters eluded capture, and Rebecca Thorne chose not to return to her former life, opting instead to forge a new identity in an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw keeps a photograph on her desk, a striking resemblance between two women. One is Rebecca Thorne, the other Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their features, seeking the nuances that set them apart, the subtle distinctions that would differentiate one from the other. What truly unsettles, Shaw imparts to new recruits, is not merely resembling someone in appearance or voice. It is the desire to assume another's identity so fervently that one erases themselves in the process. Our identity is not solely how we present ourselves to the world, but what we safeguard most dearly. And sometimes its worth is only truly comprehended when someone endeavors to steal it. Story 11. Once upon a time, there was a flicker, a mere blip in the baby monitor's transmission. The mother, caught off guard, brushed it off as a glitch in the system, attributing it to interference. But then the crackling of audio pierced the silence, and a voice, soft and eerie, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill ran down her spine, freezing her in place. With a pounding heart, she dashed to her son's room, only to find the crib empty, the window sealed shut, and the door securely locked. The only anomaly was a stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed upon her. Rebecca's screams echoed through the house until her voice turned raw, drawing the attention of concerned neighbors who swiftly summoned emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they discovered her huddled on the nursery floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of anguish. Her 4-month-old baby, Samuel, had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a void of questions and despair. The investigation that followed provided little solace. There were no signs of forced entry, the security system had remained intact, and the recorded footage from the baby monitor showed nothing amiss except for that haunting voice and static that had sent shivers down Rebecca's spine. How could someone infiltrate a locked home, snatch a child, and vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a haunting presence in the form of a stuffed toy? Initially, suspicion fell upon Rebecca. Her husband, Daniel, had been away on business, their strained marriage strained further by the weight of Samuel's disappearance. Medical records hinted at Rebecca's battle with postpartum depression, painting her as a possible suspect in the eyes of the detectives who probed her unnervingly composed demeanor. The tide turned with a microscopic discovery: fibers found on the nursery windowsill, foreign to the household fabrics or the family's attire. These fibers hinted at a stealthy intruder, possibly using a rare climbing rope to access the second-floor nursery from outside. As security footage from the neighborhood unveiled a shadowy figure skulking in the night, a partial footprint in the garden soil pointed to a skilled climber or military personnel. Rebecca's innocence became clearer as Daniel returned, his hands bearing telltale calluses from rock climbing, a hobby he had taken up to cope with stress. Financial records unveiled a suspicious life insurance policy on Samuel, secret calls to unknown numbers, and a hidden second family unknown to Rebecca. The web of deceit thickened as the investigation delved deeper. The baby monitor, once a source of comfort, emerged as a pivotal piece of evidence. Digital forensics uncovered a breach, revealing that the device had been tampered with, its signal manipulated to deceive. The voice that whispered in the dead of night had not originated from within the nursery, but had been cunningly broadcasted to the unsuspecting mother. The trail led to a chilling revelation in a residential basement, and a live Samuel under the care of Elaine, a woman with vacant eyes who surrendered without resistance. Through old photographs and DNA tests, Elaine was unveiled as Daniel's first wife, scarred by a past miscarriage, silently observing his new life unfold with Rebecca. Daniel's denial crumbled in the face of incriminating evidence: fibers matching those on the windowsill, boots akin to the garden print, and encrypted messages detailing the sinister plot hatched with Elaine. The courtroom fell silent as the enhanced audio from the baby monitor exposed the truth, sealing their fate. The jury's swift judgment condemned Daniel and Elaine for their heinous crimes, while Rebecca and Samuel found solace in a fresh start, far from the shadows of the past. The case echoed as a cautionary tale, prompting a reevaluation of security measures in nurseries and a stark warning against the evolving landscape of technological crimes. Samuel grew up oblivious to the night that had haunted his infancy, while Rebecca safeguarded the stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded that fateful night. The baby monitor, in its unassuming presence, had held the key to unraveling the mystery, a testament to the unforeseen truths that lurk in the darkness. Story 12. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a mysterious key arrived in the mail for Sarah Miller, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. The key, a single brass piece worn with time, held a strange familiarity that tugged at her senses. Despite trying it in every lock she owned, none turned it didn't belong to her. Yet when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a single hollow chime, its gears frozen in time for years. Perplexed by the odd incident, Sarah reported the key to the authorities. Initially, the responding officer brushed off her concerns as a simple mistake in the mail, but Sarah's intuition whispered otherwise, a subtle unease lingering in the air like a shadow in the night. Reluctantly, the officer took the key, sealing it in a small evidence bag that would soon unlock a chilling mystery. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a knack for unraveling intricate cases, received the file. The brass key sat on his desk, unassuming yet strangely unsettling, beckoning him into a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be unveiled. Background checks on Sarah revealed a life devoid of criminality, a retired high school English teacher, a widow with children living afar, her existence seemingly ordinary. Forensic analysis unveiled no fingerprints on the key except Sarah's, the envelope yielding no clues save for a generic postmark. The key, a standard Schlage, bore the marks of time and wear, hinting at a past shrouded in mystery. But it was the key's unique bidding pattern that led Detective Harmon down a dark path, a path intertwined with a cold case from 7 years prior, concealing blood-stained secrets and unsolved disappearances. As Harmon delved deeper, he uncovered a connection between the key and a storage unit where horrors had once lurked, hidden in plain sight. The key, a common thread linking Sarah to a dark past she never knew existed. The investigation intensified, unveiling a web of deceit woven by a predator lurking in the shadows. The search for the enigmatic Harold Jenkins, the man behind the keys, intensified, a man who had vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and unspeakable atrocities. Jenkins, a phantom in the night, a ghost haunting the minds of those who sought justice for his victims. The true horror emerged when investigators unearthed a hidden room beneath the floorboards of a cabin, a room adorned with shelves bearing the names of the fallen, each key a grim reminder of lives extinguished too soon. The cabin, a chamber of horrors, whispered tales of anguish and despair, a grim tableau of lives cut short by a malevolent hand. Sarah, thrust into a nightmare she never imagined, found herself at the center of a manhunt spanning the nation. The Keymaster, as Jenkins came to be known, a specter of darkness that had touched her life in ways she could never comprehend. The community trembled in fear, haunted by the realization that evil could lurk in the most unassuming of places. The hunt for Jenkins culminated in a final showdown, a clash of wills that ended in tragedy. Jenkins, a shadow of a man driven by malevolence, met his end in a desolate tower, leaving behind a journal filled with the harrowing accounts of his crimes. A single brass key, identical to the one Sarah had received, a chilling reminder of the darkness that had brushed against her life. The investigation unveiled a harrowing truth: 32 lives extinguished by a predator hiding in plain sight, a monster masquerading as a man. Families found closure in the wake of unspeakable loss, their wounds now scarred with the truth they had long sought. Sarah, forever changed by the ordeal, could never return to the life she once knew, haunted by the specter of the keymaster. As the case closed, the silent testimony of the brass keys lingered in the evidence locker, a stark reminder of the lives lost and the darkness that dwells within the hearts of men. The keys, mere trinkets of metal, held the key to a devastating truth, a truth that shattered the illusion of safety and exposed the fragility of peace in a world where monsters walk among us. Story 13. The apartment lay silent for months, a forgotten space waiting to be rediscovered. When the new tenants crossed its threshold, they anticipated only dust and perhaps a few remnants of the past. Yet one door stood stubbornly closed, its secrets hidden behind a lock from within. With a forceful push, the landlord revealed the contents of the long-locked closet, bracing for mundane discoveries. Instead, what met their gaze sent a shiver down their spines. The walls bore witness to a struggle, etched with deep, jagged scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. Nestled in a dark corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a chill creep down her spine as she surveyed the haunting scene. It wasn't the absence of blood or violence that unsettled her, but the silent plea of those markings, a tale of captivity and fear. "Bring in forensics immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the evidence on film, "and gather the records of the previous tenants." The cryptic message on the phone whispered only 3 words: "I know what you did." The landlord, a man uneasy with nervous energy, shared sparse details of the former tenant's sudden departure, leaving rent unpaid. "A quiet young woman, no trouble," he mumbled, his gaze skirting the closet as if afraid to delve deeper. Forensic analysis uncovered a chilling truth: within the scratches, traces of blood, mostly belonging to a single individual identified as Emma Caldwell, a missing woman of 28 years. However, 2 additional DNA samples emerged, one unknown and the other belonging to a man believed to be deceased for 2 years. Detective Shaw furrowed her brow, perplexed by the enigma presented before her. Emma's apartment whispered of a life interrupted, with unanswered mail, a solitary coffee mug, and a neatly made bed. Phone records hinted at a sudden silence in her communication, punctuated by a barrage of calls from an unidentified number before her disappearance. Her sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed relayed, intense and secretive, nameless. As surveillance footage unraveled a cryptic dance of shadows outside Emma's dwelling, a new thread emerged in the investigation. Partial fingerprints on the closet doorknob led back to Derek Mercer, a man presumed dead but now haunting the scene with his DNA signature. The puzzle expanded as Shaw traced connections to another missing woman, Lynette Porter, and the shadow of Derek Mercer loomed larger. A web of deceit and control unfurled, leading the investigators to a secluded property where another victim, Lynette, languished in darkness akin to Emma's ordeal. Journals chronicling Mercer's twisted obsessions, photographs of his captives, and damning footage painted a portrait of a man consumed by power and malice. The manhunt extended far, revealing a predator's thirst for suffering and captivity. Upon Mercer's capture, the facade of calm shattered, unveiling a mind twisted by shadows and malevolence. The trial peeled back layers of deception, exposing a meticulously crafted plan to erase identities and ensnare unsuspecting souls in his web of torment. As justice prevailed and Mercer faced his reckoning, a voice rose from the shadows of captivity. Lynette Porter's words echoed in the courtroom, a beacon of resilience against darkness. The truth, though bitter, brought closure to a chapter of terror. In the aftermath, Detective Shaw clung to a memento, a piece of the closet door, a reminder of the unseen horrors etched in the walls by a soul fighting for survival. And as the night embraced the city in its quiet embrace, the apartment stood witness to the secrets of the past, now illuminated by the light of justice. Story 14. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of clutter in the attic, a forgotten artifact from a bygone era. Within its depths resided faded Polaroids, capturing moments of joy and togetherness from days long past, innocuous snapshots of birthdays, family gatherings, and laughter. Yet amidst the mundane memories, there lurked a photo that would unravel the tranquility of Rebecca's world. As she gazed upon the final picture, a chill crept up her spine, sending shivers down her arms. The scene depicted her very own living room, the familiar couch, the comforting curtains, but the family captured in the frame was not hers, and in the shadows behind them loomed a figure, barely discernible in the dim light, watching, waiting. Rebecca's fingers quivered as she held the Polaroid, the edges vibrating with an eerie energy. The family in the photograph, a woman with honey blonde locks, a bespectacled man, and two children beamed at the camera, oblivious to the ominous presence lingering just beyond their sight. Their smiles frozen in time, juxtaposed with the looming threat that stood mere feet away. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca felt the weight of the house press down upon her, its emptiness suffocating. Placing the unsettling photo on the cold kitchen counter, she scrutinized it beneath the harsh glare of fluorescent light. The parallels were unmistakable, the archway leading to the hallway, the intricate crown molding, the bay window bathed in morning light. This was undeniably her home, yet these strangers had invaded its history. Detective Morgan arrived, clad in a worn leather jacket, his sharp eyes missing no detail as he inspected the photograph with a methodical gaze. Running a gloved finger along the edge, he flipped it over to reveal a blank back. "What do you know of the previous owners, the Nelsons?" His voice rumbled low, probing for answers. Rebecca confessed her scant knowledge, recounting how the Nelsons had vacated the property before her arrival, leaving behind a veil of mystery. Accepting the photo into evidence, Morgan's investigation unfurled like a shadow cast by an unseen hand. Delving into the annals of the house's past, Rebecca discovered a lineage of transient families preceding her own. Each household, like a fleeting ghost, had inhabited the space for precisely 1 year before vanishing without a trace. The Sutherlands, the latest enigma, had dissolved into thin air, leaving behind a haunting legacy captured in the photograph. Forensic scrutiny unveiled unsettling truths within the image, the staged composition, the unnatural stillness, the looming figure in the hallway. Tall, malevolent, shrouded in darkness, his presence a sinister specter haunting the captured moment. A pattern emerged, connecting the disappearances to a dark chapter in the house's history. Decades prior, the enigmatic architect Samuel Whitfield had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a legacy of unfinished construction. His spectral presence seemed to linger, orchestrating a macabre ballet of families lost to time. Beneath the house's foundations, a chilling revelation awaited, a crypt of preserved remains, each family interred in the earth, frozen in eternal repose. Among their possessions lay the camera that had immortalized their final moments, a silent witness to their tragic fate. As the investigation unfolded, a hidden crawl space in the attic revealed a chamber of secrets, a cot, a journal documenting the family's lives, and a chilling entry hinting at Rebecca's impending doom. Retreating to a hotel under police protection, Rebecca found no respite from the encroaching darkness. The night brought whispered phone calls, the mechanical click of a Polaroid camera, a harbinger of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. The house, now a monument to unsolved mysteries, stood silent, its windows like vacant eyes peering into the night. Samuel Whitfield, a phantom of the past, remained elusive, his legacy of terror echoing through the empty halls. And so the enigma endures, a tale woven in shadows and secrets, where the past entwines with the present in a dance of whispered horrors. As new families settle into new homes, the specter of the man in the photograph lingers, a silent sentinel watching from the darkness, his gaze following those who dare seek the truth. Story 15: The Enigmatic Manor. The new owners of the Grand Victorian Manor thought it was merely a peculiar quirk, the crackling of the old intercom system late at night, a relic of a bygone era, rewired but left forgotten. One evening, curiosity got the best of the husband, and he pressed the button. A whisper, faint yet distinct, crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" The husband recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, standing behind him, whispered softly, "I never said that." Oh. Nestled among ancient oak trees, the Victorian manor exuded an air of mystery, its weathered exterior contrasting with the modern interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker had acquired the property at a surprisingly reasonable price, despite the real estate agent's uneasy demeanor during the showing. The intercom system, a vintage feature that connected all rooms, had captivated the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of her unmarked vehicle. The call had initially been about a possible break-in, but a subtle undertone in the dispatcher's voice hinted at a deeper story. Daniel Parker, a tall figure with a pale complexion, greeted her at the door. "It all started with the intercom," he began, leading Detective Reeves through the grand foyer. At first there was only static, then whispers, and eventually complete sentences. "My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too." In the living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, her hands tightly gripping a steaming mug that remained untouched. "We uncovered something hidden behind the wall," she spoke abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and as he removed the drywall, her voice trailed off. Behind the wall, wrapped in deteriorating plastic, lay a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves carefully opened its fragile pages, revealing the elegant yet frantic handwriting of a woman named Alina, the supposed previous owner. The entries chronicled Alina's mounting suspicion that her husband, Vincent, harbored intentions of harming her. "The last entry dates back 30 years, Daniel explained. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned they purchased the house from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. Investigations unveiled that Vincent and Alina Blackwood had indeed been the former owners. Records indicated that Vincent sold the house shortly after Alina's disappearance, with no official divorce or change of address. Alina's financial footprint vanished after the final journal entry. Detective Reeves mobilized a team to thoroughly inspect the property. Ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation. As the investigators breached the aged concrete, the truth emerged in the form of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the skeleton belonged to a woman in her 40s, showing signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. A gold wedding band found amidst the remains bore a poignant inscription, "To Alina, my eternal love." The case against Vincent Blackwood swiftly materialized. Now elderly and residing in a care facility, Vincent comprehended the charges leveled against him. When confronted with the incriminating evidence, his response sent chills down Detective Reeves' spine. "She wouldn't cease her incessant chatter," Vincent uttered calmly. "Always prattling through that infernal intercom, monitoring me, interrogating me. I disconnected it, but she managed to rewire it herself, claiming she wanted to always be able to reach me, wherever I was in the house." His vacant gaze held a haunting emptiness. "I simply craved silence." During his confession, Vincent disclosed the meticulous fabrication of Aliner's abandonment, even sending postcards to neighbors from fabricated locations, all inscribed in forged handwriting. He had resided in the house for years post her demise, walking daily above the concrete concealing his wife's remains. The trial concluded swiftly, with Vincent pleading guilty to the heinous crime. The presiding judge acknowledged the premeditated nature of the act and the decades-long web of deceit that followed. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the house, unable to endure its dark past. Before departing, they hosted a memorial for Aliner in the restored garden. The intercom system was removed by the subsequent owners during renovations. Workers recounted hearing static and whispers during the extraction, attributing it to interference from their tools. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before its archival. Closing the manila folder, she contemplated how the house itself had transcended time to unveil its enigma. Justice had finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood, all due to Aliner's determined voice that refused to be silenced. The local law enforcement dubbed the case as the house that answered back. Occasionally, Detective Reeves would drive past the property on her route home. She never halted, but would decelerate, the window slightly ajar, attuned to any whispers carried on the breeze. Story 16. In the heart of the city, there was a quaint little coffee shop that held secrets whispered only by the rustling of the leaves outside. For years, a mysterious man had made this place his sanctuary, a silent observer in a world buzzing with noise. His presence was as constant as the rising sun, his routine unchanging like the rhythm of a gentle lullaby. The barista, with a knowing smile, recognized his face among the sea of strangers, but his name remained a mystery, hidden in the shadows of anonymity. Day in and day out, he would occupy the same table, place the same order, a simple black coffee, no sugar, and envelop himself in a cloak of solitude. Then one fateful day, his absence lingered in the air like a ghostly whisper. Concerned whispers floated through the air, reaching the ears of Detective Sarah Mercer, a woman with a keen eye for the enigmatic. She arrived at the coffee shop, where a sense of unease hung heavy in the atmosphere. Upon investigating the man's usual seat, a wallet lay abandoned, a silent witness to his sudden vanishing act. Inside, a driver's license bore a face without a name, an identity lost in the void of a blank space where details should have resided. As Detective Mercer delved deeper into the mystery, poring over the perplexing security footage, the truth unfurled like a shadowy dance in the moonlight. The man, now known as John Doe in the files, had indeed entered the shop, taken his seat, but had never departed. A puzzle with missing pieces, a riddle with no solution in sight. With furrowed brows, Mercer replayed the footage, searching for a clue, a hint of the inexplicable. John's actions seemed ordinary, mundane until the moment he vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The tech specialist, a beacon of logic in a sea of uncertainty, puzzled over the footage, revealing no trace of John's whereabouts after his mysterious disappearance. The restroom hallway remained untouched, a silent witness to a vanishing act that defied reason. Back at the station, Mercer sifted through the remnants of the man's existence, a wallet devoid of personal details, credit cards leading to nowhere, and a solitary business card bearing a cryptic phone number that whispered secrets in the silence of unanswered calls. The barista, a witness to the man's silent presence, shared fragments of a life lived in the corners of the coffee shop, a man of few words, a solitary figure lost in the pages of a notebook filled with cryptic symbols and sketches of unfamiliar buildings. As Mercer's investigation spiraled into the unknown, a thread of strangeness wove through the tapestry of reality. The security footage flickered with each morning entry, a subtle distortion that hinted at a reality beyond the visible. A mirror, ancient and ornate, caught Mercer's gaze, a gateway to unseen realms, a key to unlocking the mysteries that lay buried beneath the surface of the mundane. The mirror whispered of forgotten truths, of passages between worlds unseen. When the mirror was pried from its place, a hidden chamber revealed itself, a trove of identical wallets, a journal penned with the same hand as the enigmatic notebook left behind, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to a truth obscured by the veil of time. The journal spoke of experiments in temporal displacement, of identities intertwined in a dance of shadows and light. Mercer's fingers traced the words, unraveling a tapestry of impossibilities that threatened to shatter the fragile facade of reality. In the echoes of the past, a physicist emerged from the shadows, a woman with a key to unlock the door to the man who slipped through the cracks of existence. Margaret Keller's words painted a picture of a brilliant mind lost in the corridors of parallel worlds, a soul adrift in the sea of infinite possibilities. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a laboratory hidden beneath the coffee shop, a physicist lost to the mists of time, and a man named Daniel Weston who straddled the boundaries of reality and unreality. As Mercer watched the security footage late one night, a revelation unfolded, a reflection in the mirror, a duality of existence captured in a fleeting moment of clarity. Two versions of the same man, existing in a delicate balance between worlds unknown. The shattered mirror, a silent witness to a truth too profound to comprehend, whispered of closed windows and forbidden passages. Mercer stood amidst the fragments, a solitary figure in a world teetering on the edge of the unknown. And so, the man who didn't exist slipped into the shadows of legend, a mystery unsolved, a tale whispered in hushed tones by those who remember the enigma of the coffee shop that stood as a gateway to worlds unseen. Detective Mercer, haunted by the echoes of a reality beyond comprehension, retreated into the shadows, her own story intertwined with that of the man who slipped through the cracks of existence. In her hands, a notebook mirrored his own, a reflection of a truth too profound to speak. And as the city slept, the echoes of a forgotten experiment lingered in the air, a whisper of a man who dared to breach the boundaries of the known, a ghost in the machine, a shadow in the night. And so the coffee shop closed its doors, the building crumbled into dust, and the mystery of the man who didn't exist faded into the tapestry of forgotten tales. Story 17. In the old apartment, peculiar sounds echoed through the pipes and floorboards, creating a symphony of groans and creaks. But the new tenant, Sarah Coleman, sensed a difference in the rhythm of the noises she heard. The footsteps above her seemed too deliberate, too steady to be explained away by settling structures or scurrying animals. Despite living on the top floor, the phantom steps persisted, pacing methodically in the dark hours of the night. One evening, Sarah mustered the courage to tap the ceiling with a broomstick, hoping to break the eerie spell. To her surprise, the sound ceased, leaving behind a thick silence that stretched through the apartment. Then, a single knock responded from within the ceiling, sending a shiver down her spine. Sarah chose to keep the strange incident to herself, convincing her mind that it was mere building quirks or a harmless creature seeking refuge in the attic. Night after night, as the footsteps continued their haunting journey above her, she adapted by drowning them out with the blare of the television or the solace of headphones, all to escape the methodical footfalls tracing unseen paths across her ceiling. Detective Morris stumbled upon the enigmatic apartment when a maintenance worker uncovered a hidden crawlspace during repairs. Behind a section of drywall in the hallway outside Sarah's unit, a narrow passage materialized, defying the building's original design. Illuminated by a flashlight, the passage revealed a makeshift living space adorned with remnants of human presence, a blanket, food wrappers, water bottles, and a weathered notebook. The police were summoned, and Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, arrived to a scene that left the maintenance worker pale and trembling. "Someone's been living in the walls," he repeated, his voice quivering with fear. The notebook held meticulous notes on Sarah Coleman, her routines, her habits, her entire existence scrutinized in unnerving detail. The final entries spiraled into madness, with cryptic symbols scrawled at the margins hinting at a disturbed mind vying for control. Forensic teams meticulously combed the crawl space, uncovering fingerprints that remained anonymous in all databases. The intricate network of hidden passages woven into the building's structure dated back decades, connecting various apartments but converging into covert viewing points linked to only one unit, Sarah Coleman's. Interviews with current residents yielded no peculiar findings, but former tenants painted a chilling picture. 3 predecessors of Sarah described sensations of being watched, of inexplicable movements in the night. One had fled after a mere fortnight, their unease unreported for fear of appearing irrational. The breakthrough in the case arrived with the discovery of microscopic blood spatter in one of the crawl spaces, matching the DNA of a missing figure, Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished without a trace 4 years earlier from the apartment directly below Sarah's. Detective Morris revisited Martin's disappearance, unearthing accounts of confrontations with Edward, a quiet recluse who had lived above him. Edward's peculiar behavior and sudden departure after the confrontation set off alarm bells, leading investigators down a twisted path of revelations. Edward, an elusive figure with a penchant for solitude, had left a trail of unsettling history across various apartment complexes. His insatiable need for silence and his meticulous observations of his neighbors hinted at a darker purpose lurking beneath his facade of normalcy. A remote cabin nestled in rural seclusion unraveled the depths of Edward's obsession, exposing a macabre collection of images, maps, and journals documenting his twisted experiments on unsuspecting residents. The corkboard adorned with missing persons reports, bearing witness to the lives he had extinguished in pursuit of his twisted desires. The search for Edward intensified, but the elusive figure remained one step ahead, evading capture with a chilling message left behind, a promise of a new hideaway beyond the reach of justice. As the manhunt for Edward Mercer continued, Detective Morris found himself haunted by the image of Sarah, trapped in a nightmarish existence within her own home. The knowledge that the perpetrator might still be out there, lurking in the shadows, listening and waiting, cast a long shadow over his thoughts. In the quiet of his own home, Detective Morris often finds himself gazing upward, listening intently to the silence, wondering if, somewhere in the night, he might hear the faint echo of footsteps that once tormented Sarah Coleman. And in those moments of solitude, he can't help but ponder who else might be listening in the darkness. Story 18, The Unseen Observer. She never enjoyed venturing up there, but when the storm breached the roof, she had no choice. The attic loomed with forgotten treasures, draped in layers of dust and wispy cobwebs. Nestled in the corner sat an ancient dollhouse, intricately crafted, its minuscule furnishings meticulously arranged. Yet as she gazed within, a knot twisted in her stomach. The figures inside were not mere dolls, they were tiny, painstakingly carved replicas of her family. Each miniature mirrored their exact positions downstairs, except for one. The representation intended to be her stood by the attic entrance. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse's roof, feeling the groove where the small wooden figure stood. A shiver coursed through her, unrelated to the chill whispering through the attic's beams. This dollhouse had no place here. This wasn't her childhood abode. It was a rental dwelling the family had recently occupied. The unsettling discovery prompted Rebecca to contact law enforcement in a flurry of panic. Police officers arrived at the suburban home to find a distressed family, clustered in the living room, adamantly refusing to venture back upstairs. The lead detective, Sarah Harmon, initially brushed off their fears as a prank or the product of fertile imaginations adjusting to a new environment. The meticulous detail struck me, Detective Harmon later recounted. Each tiny figurine captured a distinct trait of every family member: the father's receding hairline, the teenage son's hoodie, even the minuscule birthmark on the mother's hand. The investigation took a chilling turn when forensic experts unearthed fingerprints on the dollhouse belonging to none of the family members. Even more unsettling were microscopic cameras embedded in the eyes of each miniature, all linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse itself. Examination of the Morgan family's movements revealed an eerie pattern. The miniature figures didn't just mimic their positions on that particular evening, they replicated exact stances from various days, indicating a prolonged period of observation. We soon realized this went beyond mere stalking, Detective Harmon elucidated. The perpetrator exhibited an obsession seldom seen in criminal psychology. The probe unveiled a concealed entrance in the basement, camouflaged behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, investigators uncovered a makeshift living space, littered with signs that someone had clandestinely dwelt there before the Morgans arrived. Discarded food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at the intruder's covert residency underneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. Most perplexing was the absence of signs of forced entry. Property records disclosed that the house had sat vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans took occupancy. The previous elderly owners had both passed away within a short span, leaving their son to oversee the estate sale and rental arrangements. Interrogations with neighbors yielded scant information. While most hadn't noticed anything amiss, one elderly resident mentioned sporadically observing lights in the house during its vacancy. I assumed it was the realtors showing the property, she informed investigators. Never did it cross my mind that someone might be trespassing without consent. A breakthrough occurred through digital forensics. Analysis of the surveillance system linked to the miniature cameras led investigators to an IP address registered to a small apartment across town. Inside, they encountered walls adorned with photographs of the Morgan family, and past occupants of the house. Journal entries meticulously chronicled the daily routines of each family member with disturbing accuracy. The most alarming find was a workspace cluttered with numerous half-finished dollhouses, each representing a different residence in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the deceased homeowners. Financial records unveiled mounting debts following his parents' demise. Instead of selling the property outright, he had fashioned a hidden living space, clandestinely residing there while collecting rent from unsuspecting tenants. The dollhouse functioned as his command center, the assigned forensic psychologist expounded. Each miniature figure symbolized someone he observed. Rebecca's placement by the attic door wasn't a threat, it was his acknowledgement of her discovery of his surveillance network. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed as he elucidated his motives. They dwelt in my house, slumbered in my parents' chamber. I needed to ensure they treated it with reverence. When queried about the positioned figures, he simply remarked, I wanted them to be aware that I was ever vigilant. Psychological evaluations unveiled a convoluted case of possessive delusion. Wells grappled to come to terms with relinquishing his childhood dwelling, fashioning an elaborate scheme to retain dominion over it. The dollhouse evolved into his means of asserting ownership over both the property and its inhabitants. The Morgan family never returned to the residence. Rebecca later reflected that the most haunting moment wasn't uncovering the dollhouse, but grasping its implications. We were under surveillance all along, our lives measured, our existence manipulated. The true terror wasn't the dollhouse itself, it was realizing that to him, we were merely pawns to be arranged and observed. Wells faced multiple charges including stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and unlawful entry. The case spurred a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws concerning deaths on properties and the duty of agents to certify homes are properly vacated before new occupants move in. During sentencing, the judge underscored the profound violation endured by the Morgan family. You didn't just breach their domicile, you violated their sense of security and independence. You witnessed their most intimate moments and replicated them for your pleasure. What unsettles criminologists about this case is how long Wells might have persisted undetected had Rebecca not stumbled upon the dollhouse. Scrutiny of his journals suggested he had covertly resided within homes for nearly 2 years, migrating from one property to the next, crafting dollhouses for each observed family. The Morgan family eventually resettled far from the haunting dwelling, yet Rebecca confessed in her victim impact statement that she still scrutinizes closets and hidden nooks habitually. She eradicated all dollhouses and miniatures from their new abode. At times I sense eyes on me, she confided. I ponder if somewhere, someone is still maneuvering a miniature version of me within an undiscovered dollhouse. Story 19, The Realtor's Revelation. The listing of the real estate agent made no mention of a basement. The blueprints provided no indication of its existence. Yet, as the family removed the worn carpet, they stumbled upon a hidden door, a door adorned with a heavy, rusted handle that required the strength of 3 to pry it open. A rush of stale air, thick with the scent of damp earth, greeted them as they descended the steps into the darkness below. Expecting storage space, they were met with a solitary chair beneath a swaying light bulb, casting eerie shadows on the wall adorned with a row of photographs of them. The Mercer family had settled into their suburban abode during the winter months, enveloped by early darkness and bare trees standing against the cold sky. The aged two-story structure, with its weathered siding and creaking floors, exuded character and history, or so they believed. Little did they know the depths of history the house held and the chilling collision it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors, accompanied by her partner, arrived at the property where the crime scene unit had already cordoned off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice trembled over the phone as she recounted the startling discovery hidden beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else ventures down there," Connors directed, slipping on latex gloves with practiced ease. Strobe lights from the camera illuminated the stairwell as the forensic team meticulously captured the scene, the wooden steps groaning under their weight. The basement, no larger than a standard bedroom, boasted concrete walls painted a drab gray. In the center sat a lone chair bolted to the floor, while above it the stark bulb cast harsh shadows, swaying gently in an unseen draft. However, it was the wall of photographs that demanded attention, 37 images meticulously arranged in chronological order. "These date back nearly 4 weeks," observed Connor's partner, scrutinizing the timestamps on the backs of the prints. "Look here, Mrs. Mercer dozing on the couch, Mr. Mercer at the kitchen table, the children in their rooms." The investigation unveiled no signs of forced entry, no evidence of intrusion such as broken windows or tampered locks. The security system had remained silent. Nothing was stolen, only their privacy and sense of security. Forensic analysis revealed multiple fingerprints, most belonging to the previous property owners. Records revealed a pattern of the house changing hands 6 times in the past decade, each family residing for less than a year before selling at reduced prices. None had mentioned the existence of a basement. "We must interview every former owner," Connors instructed, flipping through her notepad. As they delved deeper into the property's history, the case grew increasingly unsettling. Discrepancies in the records emerged: altered blueprints, withdrawn permits, redacted inspection reports. The breakthrough arrived when they interrogated the contractor who had renovated the house 7 years prior. His face drained of color upon viewing the basement photos. "That room is not real," he asserted, hands trembling. "I stripped that place down to its foundation. There was no basement, no door, just dirt and concrete beneath the living room." Extracted from a hidden memory card within the light fixture, digital forensics unveiled hundreds more images capturing not only the Mercers but previous families. Children asleep, parents arguing, intimate moments and mundane routines, all surreptitiously documented by an uninvited observer. The case took a darker turn with the recovery of audio files from a weatherproof box concealed in the basement, containing recordings of conversations held in various rooms. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors declared urgently, her voice taut. "Inspect the air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The perpetrator has been monitoring these families for years." Beyond the photo wall, investigators stumbled upon a narrow passage leading to a monitoring station equipped with a desk, a chair, a laptop linked to wireless cameras, and a journal brimming with meticulous observations on each family. The handwriting matched that of the house's original builder, a man named Edward Kelvin, who, records revealed, had vanished during the house's construction with no official trace. The journal's final entries grew increasingly erratic, with phrases like "they never looked down" and "they never see me" haunting the pages. The chilling climax was a single sentence on the last page: "The next family arrives tomorrow." Fingerprint analysis confirmed the suspicions. Edward Kelvin never departed from the house he constructed. Instead, he retreated into its concealed recesses, constructing a network of observation points to surveil families who believed they dwelled in solitude. A 3-day manhunt led to Kelvin's discovery curled within a crawlspace amid the second-floor bedrooms, his emaciated form suited for navigating the narrow passages he had crafted within the walls. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as if they were players in his private drama, watching them with detached curiosity, documenting their lives. "They welcomed me in," he murmured to investigators, his voice rational and soft. "They signed the papers. They became mine." Psychological evaluations diagnosed Kelvin with severe delusions, viewing himself as the house's custodian rather than an intruder. The Mercer family never returned, departing with only their essentials in suitcases. As the legal proceedings transpired, the extent of Kelvin's surveillance network was unveiled: secret rooms accessible through crawl spaces, hidden observation points integrated into the structure, meticulously planned long before the first brick was laid. Upon the jury's verdict, Kelvin displayed no reaction, having withdrawn into the recesses of his mind, where he roamed the house's passages, invisible and untouchable. The property was razed, the earth beneath it excavated and filled. Yet for the families that had resided there, the violation lingered. They were haunted not by what was taken from them, but by what they had remained unaware of being watched, listened to, their privacy breached within walls they had trusted. In moments of silence, they found themselves glancing at air vents, light fixtures, and the corners where walls met sailing, pondering whether they truly existed in solitude, questioning if they ever had. Story 20. It began with a pocket dial, a simple mishap of technology, just static and muffled sounds that could easily be dismissed. The operator's initial instinct was to ignore it until a voice, faint yet urgent, cut through the noise. A woman's voice whispering frantically into the void, "He's here." And then an unsettling silence descended, swallowing her words whole. The phone number traced back to an empty house, a dwelling that had been abandoned for years, left to the mercy of time's relentless march. There were no signs of forced entry, no disturbances to speak of. Yet amidst the layers of dust that clung to every surface in the dimly lit kitchen, there sat the phone on the counter, its screen softly glowing with an otherworldly light. The call had been placed mere minutes ago, a chilling fact that sent shivers down Detective Morgan Reed's spine. Detective Reed pressed the playback button repeatedly, hoping to unravel the mystery that now enveloped her. The whispered words of the unknown woman lingered in her mind, haunting her with their desperation, their palpable fear, their sheer impossibility. The abandoned property, once belonging to the Sullivan family, stood as a silent witness to a past tragedy, the devastating house fire that had ravaged the West Wing, prompting the family to flee. Since then, the house had stood vacant, its only visitor a caretaker who swore that no intruders had crossed its threshold in years. "Background check on the number," Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The response came swiftly, revealing that the number was registered to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the Sullivan family, who had tragically perished in a car accident 3 years prior. The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit together, creating a perplexing image of a dead woman's phone making calls from a house frozen in abandonment. The forensic team scoured the scene, searching for clues in the untouched layers of dust. Their efforts yielded little, for there were no fingerprints on the device save for elusive smudges that defied identification. No footprints marked the path to or from the house, and the locked doors and sealed windows offered no easy answers. The enigma deepened as the phone on the counter seemed to defy logic, as if it had materialized out of thin air. The recording of the whispered call became the focal point of their investigation. Those fleeting 11 seconds of static, of labored breathing, of 5 haunting words that echoed in the empty rooms. Voice analysis confirmed a chilling truth: the voice matched that of Catherine Sullivan, with a certainty of 98%, drawn from old video recordings of her. Moreover, the timestamp of the call aligned perfectly with the moment of Catherine's tragic demise, down to the very minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into Catherine's past, seeking answers from those who had known her best. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely bewildered by the unfolding events. Her mother, a solitary figure in a small apartment, crumbled under the weight of the whispered words, recognizing them as her daughters with a heart-wrenching certainty. And then there was Mark Jennings, Catherine's former boyfriend, who held an airtight alibi for the night of the call, a night spent toiling away in the hospital, a fact corroborated by multiple witnesses and security footage. The threads of the investigation seemed to fray, each lead a dead end in the maze of unanswered questions. And then a breakthrough arrived in the form of a call from Catherine's mother. "I found something in her belongings," she trembled over the phone. "Katie kept a journal, the last entry. You must see it." Within the pages of Catherine's journal, a tale unfolded, a narrative of love turned toxic, of fear festering in the shadows of control and manipulation. The final entry bore a chilling message. "He knows I'm leaving. His rage knows no bounds. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident." Confronted with the damning evidence of the journal, Mark's facade of innocence began to crack under the weight of scrutiny. Denials faltered as questions pierced through his carefully constructed defenses. The revelation of his presence at the scene of Catherine's fatal accident before the arrival of emergency responders sent a tremor of unease through the investigation. A return to the scene of the long-ago crash unearthed a startling discovery: a phone buried 20 feet from the wreckage, Catherine's actual phone, the one she had used to reach out for help on that fateful night. Forensic examination of the buried device revealed deleted messages that painted a harrowing picture of Catherine's final moments, a tale of pursuit, of forced reckoning on a desolate road. The medical examiner's reassessment of Catherine's autopsy photos revealed a truth long concealed beneath the guise of tragedy. The injuries she bore the sinister imprint of violence, of a struggle for survival that had been cruelly cut short. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, each one a damning indictment of Mark's deceit. When the authorities descended upon Mark's abode to bring him to justice, they found a macabre shrine dedicated to Catherine, a twisted homage to a life snuffed out too soon, a life he had extinguished with callous intent. Among his possessions lay the tools of manipulation, the software to craft the ghostly echoes of Catherine's voice that had reverberated through the abandoned house. As the trial unfolded, as the jury weighed the evidence of Mark's crimes, the specter of Catherine loomed large in the courtroom, a silent witness to the horrors inflicted upon her. And when the verdict was rendered, when justice was finally served, it was not through supernatural means, but through the unwavering truth that Catherine had left behind, etched in her journal, in her whispered pleas for salvation. The phone that had sparked the investigation now rests in the evidence locker, its silent presence a reminder of the voices that refuse to be silenced, even in death. And though the officers swear they hear phantom rings echoing in the stillness, the battery had long been removed, leaving only the ghostly echo of a tale that transcends the boundaries of the living. Catherine's story endures, not as a mere ghost story whispered in the dark, but as a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to be forgotten, whose voices echo through the corridors of time, demanding justice, demanding remembrance. Story 21, The Enigmatic House. She crossed the threshold into the abandoned Victorian, a haze of dust dancing in the still air. The house stood frozen in time, its walls shedding paint, its furniture draped in ghostly sheets. Every room she entered felt like a recurring dream, a loop leading back to the parlor. The doors, no matter how she tried, refused to lead anywhere but back to where she began. And the front door she had entered through, it had vanished without a trace. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form turned the once forgotten house into a scene of intrigue and sorrow. Detective Sarah Lind lingered in the shadows, watching as forensic experts moved silently through the dimly lit rooms. This house, whispered about by locals for its strange energies and eerie tales, now held secrets darker than anyone could have imagined. The initial findings suggest she passed 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words barely breaking the heavy silence. Asphyxiation seems to be the cause. Morgan was discovered seated in an ancient chair in the parlor, her posture serene, as if patiently awaiting a visitor. No signs of struggle, no evidence of a fight. The calmness of the scene unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. "Who found her?" Lind inquired, her voice soft in the oppressive stillness. "A real estate agent showing the property," her partner replied. "They thought she was a trespasser until they drew near." The house had remained empty since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, years before. Legal battles had left it abandoned, a relic unwanted and shunned, except by the curious and the daring. Morgan Pierce, a young scholar of 26, had been drawn to the Victorians' mysteries. Her passion for exploring architectural anomalies led her to the house where compasses spun wildly and shadows seemed to whisper. She had a reputation for meticulous research and an insatiable curiosity for spaces that defied logic. Her roommate reported her missing days ago, Lind noted, scanning through her notes. She mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her studies. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Morgan had been to the house multiple times before her demise. Her journal spoke of strange echoes, chilling drafts, and doors that led to different places with each opening. In one final entry, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to capture what she called spatial anomalies, but that equipment was nowhere to be found. During the autopsy, an unexpected detail emerged: traces of a rare substance, an alkaloid known for inducing disorientation and vivid visions, but not in lethal doses. She wasn't one to dabble in drugs, her boyfriend insisted. Morgan was disciplined in her methods. She wouldn't have jeopardized her work knowingly. Deleted messages recovered from her phone hinted at a mysterious connection, someone who shared her fascination with the house's secrets. The correspondence grew intimate and cryptic, hinting at knowledge beyond mortal grasp. The trail led to Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural history and a correspondent of Morgan's. He spoke of the house's hidden complexities, of secrets woven into its very walls, but he had an alibi for the time of Morgan's passing, a solid alibi captured on security cameras. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a descendant of Eleanor Blackwood living abroad. He unveiled a family secret buried for generations, a legacy of lives claimed by the house's influence. The family called it the Claiming, a silent force that drew souls into its embrace. Hidden behind the parlor's fireplace, investigators uncovered Morgan's missing equipment and a chamber of ancient artifacts arranged in a cryptic pattern. At the center, a weathered figurine representing a deity of thresholds and transitions. The substance on the artifacts matched the alkaloid found in Morgan's body. Further analysis of the house revealed mysterious fingerprints, not belonging to Morgan or any known visitors. Someone else had been present when Morgan took her last breath. Weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was found in a similar state as Morgan, with the same substance in his system. Clutched in his hand, a key that unlocked the hidden compartment in the Victorian. In his final correspondence, Reeves spoke of the house's grip on perception, how it twisted reality and trapped the unwary in its endless loops. He hinted at a truth that, once understood, held one captive willingly. The case remains open, a mystery shrouded in shadows and whispers. The condemned Victorian stands as a silent sentinel, its secrets buried within its walls. Rumors speak of lights flickering in the dead of night, of visitors who vanish without a trace. Some say the house claims those who delve too deep, who seek to unravel its enigmas. Others believe Morgan and Reeves unearthed a force as old as time, existing in the liminal spaces between worlds. The truth eludes grasp, much like an exit in a house where all doors lead to the beginning, trapping the unwary in its eternal dance of shadows and light. Story 22. The old Polaroid held secrets within its faded hues, a relic of bygone birthdays and smiling faces. A daughter's inheritance of a box labeled memories unveiled a chilling discovery, a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows of family gatherings, unnoticed yet ever closer with each passing photo. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the unsettling truth while sifting through her mother's attic after the funeral. The photographs, tinged with nostalgia, now carried an eerie weight. The phantom presence, initially a mere silhouette at the edge of a birthday party snapshot, gradually encroached upon the frame, a ghostly specter haunting the past. Puzzled and unnerved, Sarah turned to her father for answers, only to be met with disbelief. Who was this enigmatic figure, weaving through the cherished moments frozen in time? The unanswered question echoed in the silence, shrouding the photos in a veil of mystery. Seeking resolution, Sarah sought the help of Detective Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail. As rain tapped against the precinct windows, the detective scrutinized the progression of photos laid out before him, tracing the phantom's ominous journey through the family gatherings. With each image examined, a sense of unease settled in a creeping realization that the figure was no mere trick of the light. The investigation delved deeper, unraveling a sinister connection to past disappearances, long buried in the shadows of memory. Enhanced images revealed chilling details: a scar, a ring, a reflection, and led to a breakthrough through dental records. The elusive figure was unmasked as Robert Keller, a former maintenance worker with a dark history tied to unsolved child abductions. His presence in the photos was a haunting reminder of past horrors concealed in plain sight. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community, linking cold cases across decades and offering closure to families long haunted by uncertainty. As the truth came to light, the shadowy figure in the photos emerged as a sinister force, finally held to account for his heinous crimes. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the damning evidence captured in the photographs, Sarah grappled with the weight of the past. The candles in the final birthday photo cast a solemn glow, illuminating the faces of her family frozen in time. And there in the background, the figure lingered, a haunting presence now exposed, his malevolent legacy laid bare. The box of memories held the key to a dark chapter in history, a reminder that even in moments of joy, unseen dangers may lurk within the frame. Through the lens of time, the hidden figures emerged, their secrets unveiled in a chilling tale of shadows and revelation. Story 23. Deep within the heart of the old library, whispers of a dark secret lingered, hidden behind the dusty tomes and forgotten tales. The time had come for the library's end, its walls echoing with the sound of destruction. Workers moved methodically, their hammers and saws tearing through the aged structure. But fate had other plans, woven into the fabric of a single moment when a worker's foot found purchase on a hidden latch within a weathered bookshelf. With a gentle click, the bookshelf yielded, revealing a passage cloaked in shadows, a passage leading to a world long abandoned. The air within was heavy, saturated with the weight of time, untouched by human hands for decades. In the heart of this hidden chamber, a solitary chair stood, a silent sentinel bolted to the floor. And etched upon the walls in desperate repetition, a haunting message lingered: I am still here. The call went out, piercing the veil of silence that had shrouded the library for so long. The construction foreman's voice crackled over the radio, summoning the authorities to the scene. What had begun as a routine demolition now unfurled into a tapestry of mystery and dread. Detective Morgan Walsh, a veteran of the force, stood at the threshold of the hidden room, his flashlight slicing through the darkness like a blade, revealing the chilling words that adorn the walls. "Secure the scene," Walsh commanded, his voice echoing in the confined space, a whisper of authority amidst the shadows. "No one moves until forensics arrives." As the forensic team delved into the hidden room, a tale of horror began to unravel, woven from strands of the past and the present. Hair and fibers clung to the ancient chair, remnants of a struggle long forgotten. The walls bore witness to a tragedy, blood and skin cells mingling with the dust of ages, hinting at a story untold. The history of the library cast a long shadow over the investigation, its roots entwined with the enigmatic Harrington family. Once pillars of the community, the family had gifted the library to the public following the vanishing of their daughter, Rebecca. Her disappearance had been a mystery shrouded in silence, her absence a wound that refused to heal. As the forensic puzzle pieces fell into place, a sinister truth emerged from the shadows. The DNA found in the hidden room matched that of Rebecca, her fate intertwined with the very walls that had held her captive. Maxwell Harrington, the family patriarch, emerged as a figure cloaked in darkness, his actions veiled in deceit and betrayal. The investigation delved deeper, unearthing secrets long buried beneath layers of deceit. The contractor who had installed the bookshelf, the elderly librarian who had sensed a presence in the shadows, all threads that wove a tapestry of guilt and grief. In a coastal town far from the library's hallowed halls, Maxwell Harrington sat in silence, his past catching up to him in the form of a leather-bound journal and damning evidence. His confession rang hollow in the stillness of the interrogation room, a tale of obsession and murder laid bare. The truth, like a specter, rose from the depths of the hidden room. Rebecca's remains, clad in a silver bracelet of her youth, bore witness to a life cut short by greed and malice. The courtroom became a stage for justice, a reckoning long overdue. And as the library stood on the brink of oblivion, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past, the community gathered to pay homage to a life lost to the shadows. Flowers bloomed at the entrance, a tribute to a soul that had lingered in the darkness, waiting to be set free. In the end, it was a message etched in desperation that spoke the loudest: I am still here, a haunting echo of a life extinguished too soon, a reminder that even in the silence of the night, justice will always find its way into the light. Story 24. In the quiet of the night, the new tenants of the Victorian-era home embarked on a journey that would unravel mysteries hidden within its walls. Michael and Sarah Klein, drawn to the charm of the old residence, never expected the secrets that awaited them beneath the peeling wallpaper. It all began with a simple water stain in the master bedroom, a yellowish discoloration spreading across the floral wallpaper like a whispered secret begging to be revealed. As they peeled back the layers, they uncovered a tale etched in ink, a name repeated over and over, filling every inch of the wall in a frantic, uneven script. "Alina Winters," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath in the stillness of the room. The discovery sent shivers down their spines, sparking a curiosity that would consume their thoughts and dreams. In the glow of their laptop screen, Michael and Sarah delved into the depths of the internet, searching for traces of Alina Winters. What they found was a single thread connecting the present to a missing persons case from decades past, a young woman with dark hair and haunting eyes, a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to the one who had sold them the house. Their nights turned into a quest for answers, their days filled with echoes of a past long forgotten. The renovation of their home took a backseat as they pieced together fragments of a puzzle that seemed to defy logic and reason. Through old records and faded memories, they uncovered the enigma of Margaret Cavendish, the woman who had vanished into the shadows of time, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and a trail of false identities. As they dug deeper, they unearthed a hidden space beneath the floorboards, a secret chamber that held the key to unraveling the twisted truth. Identification cards bearing different names, each with the same face staring back at them with silent accusation. The revelation of DNA evidence from within the walls sent shockwaves through their reality, connecting the dots in a way that sent chills down their spines. Alina Winters and Rebecca Eldridge, two names intertwined in a web of deceit and madness that spanned decades. The walls of their home bore witness to a tragedy born of obsession and fractured minds, a story that transcended time and space, blurring the lines between truth and illusion. And as forensic teams worked tirelessly to unearth the buried secrets of the backyard, Michael and Sarah stood on the threshold of a revelation that would change their lives forever. In the end, justice was served, but the echoes of the past lingered in the air, casting a shadow over their once charming home. The walls themselves had spoken, revealing a tale of love turned to madness, of identities lost and found in the labyrinth of the human mind. And so, as the night settled over the house, Michael and Sarah found solace in the knowledge that some mysteries are meant to be uncovered, even if the truth they reveal is darker than the deepest shadows of the night. The house stood as a testament to the power of memory, the weight of guilt, and the enduring legacy of those who fade into the whispers of history. Story 25, the costume store was in its final days, liquidating its old stock. Amidst the chaos of clearance, a woman's hand reached for a mask nestled on a forgotten shelf, its delicate features both enchanting and eerily lifelike. The cashier hesitated as she placed it on the counter, a whisper of uncertainty in his voice as he muttered, "That's not ours." Perplexed, she inspected the mask, but there was no tag to offer any clues. With a shrug, she decided to take it home. That very night, a soft rustle stirred her from slumber, a gentle sound like fabric shifting in the stillness. The mask was no longer perched on her dresser where she had left it. Instead, it sat upon her nightstand, facing her with an unsettling gaze. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was discovered by her concerned neighbor. The front door creaked open, inviting the morning light to spill into the shadowed interior of her home. What the neighbor stumbled upon was a scene that would linger in the minds of investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mysterious mask nowhere to be found. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene, greeted by the hushed whispers of her fellow officers and the rhythmic clicks of the shutters as forensics documented the grim tableau. "No signs of forced entry," remarked one officer, jotting down notes in his pad. The detective's keen eyes scanned the room, absorbing every detail with a silent intensity. A partially open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass, all seemingly ordinary in contrast to the tragedy that had unfolded the woman who would never awaken again. The medical examiner, with a somber expression, leaned over Catherine's body, his examination yielding no immediate answers. Cause of death unclear upon initial inspection. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, he remarked, gesturing to her frozen expression of terror. Crouching beside the lifeless form, the detective whispered, something frightened her to her very core. Catherine, a quiet soul immersed in the world of art appraisal, was described by colleagues as meticulous and unwavering in her pursuit of authenticity. Her boss reminisced during questioning, she had an eye for spotting discrepancies that others overlooked. The detective pondered whether Catherine's keen eye had inadvertently led to her untimely demise. Security footage from the costume shop revealed a curious interaction. The cashier's bewilderment at the mask's origins was palpable, prompting him to seek the owner's clarification. Lip-reading experts later deciphered the owner's response. "We never stocked anything like this." A visit to the now barren shop unraveled a tale of mystery and misfortune. The owner, visibly distressed, confessed, "That mask materialized during our clearance event. Its origins remain a mystery, not part of our inventory." Pressed further, he reluctantly admitted, such occurrences followed acquisitions from the estate sale of a collector whose demise was shrouded in enigma. A breakthrough emerged when forensics unearthed microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. She clutched onto something, the lab technician explained. "These fibers are peculiar, neither modern nor synthetic. They comprise a blend of human hair and an unidentified organic substance absent from any known database." The trail of investigation led to a harrowing revelation, a series of deaths spanning decades, each victim possessing an enigmatic mask before meeting their demise, their faces etched in sheer terror. Yet, each case remained a haunting enigma. A retired detective, a veteran of such mysteries, agreed to share his insights. In a dimly lit room, he passed a weathered file across the table, hands trembling. "We discovered inscriptions inside each mask, concealed beneath the lining," he disclosed. "Ancient symbols hinting at a ritual entwined with soul transference." The puzzle pieces coalesced to form a chilling narrative. An unexpected breakthrough emerged from an unlikely source, a journal clandestinely tucked behind a loose baseboard in Catherine's residence. Her final entry chronicled a growing sense of unease, a palpable feeling of being surveilled within her own sanctuary. Her quest for the mask's origins, spurred by the cashier's cryptic reaction, led her to a web of enigmatic deaths. "The mask stirs," her frantic script revealed. "It observes me in my slumber." Encrypted markings within, mirroring those from unresolved cases. The previous owner of these masks met a similar fate, a cycle of possession, of transferring essence. The entity seeks a new vessel, compelling the mask to seek those cognizant of its true nature. The detective pieced together the fragments, the mysterious fibers, Catherine's clandestine research, the pattern of inexplicable deaths. Finally, the medical examiner unveiled the cause of death, cardiac arrest induced by abject fear. What terror could paralyze a soul to the point of cardiac failure? The investigation took a macabre turn as surveillance footage from a neighboring abode unearthed a detail, overlooked a figure exiting Catherine's residence under the shroud of night. adorned with what appeared to be the mask and uncanny imitation of Catherine's gait, yet mechanical, as if a puppeteer guided her movements with eerie precision. An alert for the missing mask was issued, but it remained elusive until 6 months later, when whispers surfaced of a peculiar mask surfacing in a vintage emporium across the nation. By the time investigators arrived, it had changed hands, its new owner's identity obscured. The case languished, officially unresolved. The detectives safeguarded Catherine's journal in a desk drawer, a testament to a reality surpassing conventional understanding. In the quiet of night, a shiver occasionally jolted her awake, a lingering sensation of being monitored. She secured her abode, warding off the encroaching shadows, mindful of the mask's propensity to seek out those who comprehended its sinister purpose, a vessel awaiting occupation, perpetuating a cycle initiated eons ago, destined to persist. The mask slumbers, awaiting its next awakening, its vacant gaze fixed upon an unsuspecting soul, hungering for the essence veiled behind mortal eyes. Story 26. In the depths of the attic, nestled beneath a worn and forgotten blanket, they stumbled upon it. A porcelain doll, ancient and fragile, with its azure eyes wide and unwavering. Sarah and Michael, a young couple captivated by the allure of a Victorian house they acquired at auction, brushed off the doll as just another relic of the past. As night descended and they retired to their slumber, a peculiar sensation lingered in the air. The stillness seemed to stretch endlessly, wrapping around them like a heavy cloak, and when dawn broke, the doll was no longer perched in the shadows of the attic. It now sat solemnly at the foot of their bed. Detective Rachel Winters was beckoned into the unfolding mystery on a crisp autumn morning. The scene she encountered was chilling. The female victim posed unnaturally in the master bedroom, her eyes frozen in a mask of terror. Nearby, the male victim appeared as if he had been fleeing from an unseen dread. As Detective Winters delved into the investigation, a sense of unease settled over the neighborhood. Whispers of shadows dancing behind curtains and ghostly laughter echoing through the abandoned house added layers of apprehension to the unfolding tale. Forensic analysis uncovered traces of antique fabrics, akin to those used in doll clothing, dispersed throughout the house. Yet there were no fingerprints, no DNA trails, no tangible evidence of an intruder. It was as if the perpetrator existed beyond the physical realm. The history of the house revealed a haunting pattern, past owners meeting tragic fates under peculiar circumstances, each incident shrouded in mystery. A tale emerged of a doll maker who had once resided within the walls, crafting dolls with an otherworldly touch, rumored to hold spirits within their delicate forms. As Detective Winters unraveled the threads of the past, a connection emerged between the victim's renovations in the attic and the enigmatic doll that seemed to transcend time. Old photographs hinted at the doll's malevolent nature, its ability to shift positions in the blink of an eye. The investigation took a chilling turn when a descendant of the doll maker divulged tales of dark rituals and the binding of souls to inanimate objects. The line between folklore and reality blurred, leaving the case suspended in a web of unanswered questions. Despite her best efforts, Detective Winters found herself at a standstill, the truth slipping through her fingers like mist. The elusive doll vanished from custody, leaving behind a trail of confusion and disbelief. The house changed hands once more, its dark history a whispered warning to prospective buyers. The attic, now empty save for a solitary blanket, held secrets that remained undisturbed by the new occupants. As nights fell in a hush over the neighborhood, whispers persisted of a spectral presence lingering in the attic, a faint echo of childlike laughter drifting on the wind. And Detective Winters, in her quiet retirement, safeguarded a forbidden memory, a photograph that held the key to a legacy of enigmatic dolls and haunted pasts. Story 27. The gentle current whispered secrets as it flowed that tranquil morning, the water shimmering like liquid glass under the soft rays of the sun. The lone fisherman, lost in his thoughts, almost missed the peculiar sight of a suitcase bobbing near the shore. Initially dismissing it as discarded clothes, he hesitated when a pungent odor wafted towards him, a thick, oppressive scent that hung heavy in the air. Intrigued, he approached, noticing the case enveloped in chains, its edges tinged with rust from exposure to the elements. When authorities pried it open, the contents revealed a haunting truth. Instead of garments, there was a tangle of hair, fingers frozen in a silent grasp, and at the bottom, a chilling note: "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, her steps measured as she took in the eerie tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s named Catherine Walsh, lay pale and still, her dark hair contrasting sharply against her waterlogged skin. The meticulous work of the medical examiner painted a somber picture, each detail catalogued with precision before the body was tenderly removed. What struck Mercer wasn't just the methodical disposal of the body, but the eerie reverence with which the victim had been arranged: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, clad in expensive attire. She wasn't discarded hastily, Mercer mused, her gaze following the rhythmic lapping of the water against the shoreline. She was prepared, presented. As details of Catherine Walsh's life emerged, a portrait of a successful real estate agent took shape. Divorced, childless, she inhabited a world of opulence and solitude in an upscale neighborhood. Colleagues painted her as driven, meticulous, and fiercely private. Her sudden disappearance, noted by her concerned assistant, coincided with a crucial showing that could have secured her largest commission to date. In their quest for answers, investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously curated existence. Her home exuded an air of pristine perfection, every aspect flawlessly arranged. Yet a subtle anomaly beckoned from her office, a drawer slightly ajar, revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry spoke of unseen eyes and a haunting presence. Digital footprints unveiled a series of unsettling emails, all bearing the same ominous message: "I see your perfection." Mercer's intuition stirred as she connected the dots between the cryptic notes, Walsh's vigilance, and the calculated display of her demise. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, a pawnshop proprietor who recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace. The trail led to Michael Linden, a nondescript maintenance worker with a penchant for the unnoticed. Surveillance footage unveiled his clandestine visits to Walsh's residence, a pattern of silent observation and meticulous planning. Inside Linden's modest abode, a chilling revelation awaited. Walls adorned with stolen glimpses of Walsh and other women, their likenesses captured in unsuspecting moments. Among the unsettling displays, a hidden chamber revealed a shrine and unsettling homage to lives interrupted, each item meticulously catalogued, each detail a macabre token of obsession. In the stark confines of the interrogation room, Linden's unassuming facade crumbled under the weight of evidence. His chilling confession exposed a twisted logic, a delusion intertwined with a quest for perfection. "They were flawed," he uttered, devoid of emotion. "Their perfection a facade I could not abide." The search for Linden's previous victims unearthed 2 more suitcases, each bearing silent witnesses to his meticulous rituals. The trial laid bare his meticulous methods, his calculated pursuit of women who embodied an unattainable ideal. As justice was served and a life sentence pronounced, the families of the victims found solace in closure, yet questions lingered in the wake of Lyndon's dark legacy. For Detective Mercer, the case closed with a heavy finality, yet shadows of doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. What unseen forces had driven Lyndon to his chilling deeds? What fractured mirror reflected his distorted perception of flawlessness? The river continued its eternal dance downstream, carrying secrets untold beneath its placid surface. In the hushed confines of the precinct, Mercer's desk held remnants of a chilling truth, a reminder that within the facade of normalcy, shadows lurked waiting to be unveiled. And in the stillness of the night, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, the echoes of dark deeds whispered in the wind, a cautionary tale of the hidden depths within us all.